Chapter 257. Grom Hell roar was mighty and domineering. Whether it was his trademark roar, his courage, or his unparalleled violent attack power. Tearing a lion apart with his bare hands and going through countless battles without a single defeat was not enough to describe the domineering Grom, whom Duque had called Lord Howl before he transmigrated. If one had to describe Grom's strength in one sentence, it would be that he could dismantle a Gundam with his bare hands. The story began with Grom's father, Galmash Hellroar, whom Duque called Grandpa Howl. Galmash was the chief of the Warsong clan. He was a powerful warrior during his lifetime and was known as the Giant Butcher. Few orcs could be like him, both deeply respected by his own clansmen and terrifying his enemies. One time, Galmash and his clansmen encountered a huge Golem and a fierce battle ensued. What was a Golem? A Golem was a terrifying one-eyed monster that was 2 or 3 times taller than an ogre. Duque believed that only the one-eyed giants of ancient Greece before he transmigrated could be the prototype of this monster called Golem. During the fierce battle, Galmash was caught by the Golem. When his body was bitten to pieces by the Golem's guillotine-like mouth, Galmash endured the pain and used the last of his strength to chop his battle-axe Gorehowl into the Golem's eye before he died. When they fell, the first to die was the Golem. After this battle, Gorehowl became famous everywhere and became the symbol of the Warsong clan's chief. Galmash eventually earned the surname Hellroar for his clan. The Hellroar clan was also very good at fighting huge things. For example, such a huge warship had been dismantled by Grom in a few moves. Were the tribal heroes really monsters? Although Duque wanted to push Lothar, who had the highest combat power on his side, and Uther, who had just arrived last night, to fight Lord Howl for 300 rounds, the problem was that this was a King naval battle. Could Lothar and Uther, who were fully armored, win? Don't be ridiculous. If these two powerful people drowned because of this reason, Duque would not be able to forgive himself. Just as Uther was about to step out and ask to fight with a fearless spirit of sacrifice, Duque said, "Hey Aurelia, Cervantes, do you hear me?" An echo immediately came from the wind. Aurelia awaits Deputy Commander's orders. Yo, there's finally something exciting to do. Duque cleared his throat and said, "I want you 2 sisters to deal with the onion-haired orc chief who just tore down our warship. Yes, the one with the blood-red hooked axe. His name was Grom Hellscream and he was one of the strongest fighters in the horde. Don't be careless. I promise I'll kill him." Aurelia was as steady as ever. "Oh, sister, let's not compete in killing enemies. Those moving targets aren't that great. Let's compete to see who can kill more chiefs." This time it was a voice that only Duque could hear. Duque was under a lot of pressure when faced with such an off-topic Queen Sylvanas. Uther couldn't help it anymore. He stepped forward and said, "Deputy Commander, Uther and his silver hand request to fight." Duque glanced at Uther, who was much older than him, and said, "I know your chivalry can't stand having a woman fight on your behalf. But I want to tell you, first, don't treat the sisters as weak. Second, unless you're very good at swimming in armor, leave it to the 2 sisters." Uther was quite annoyed by Duque, but as a noble paladin, he knew very well that Duque was not targeting him or looking down on his silver hand. It was just that Uther was as puzzled as the other generals. Why did Duque seem to know their abilities and specialties so well? From the beginning of the Battle of South Shore, Duque's formation had no flaws or problems. Not only could he predict the enemy, but he was also very clear about his own people. The problem was that Duque hadn't even visited their troops. Naturally, Duque didn't have time to explain to them. Or perhaps Duque couldn't explain at all. He'd arranged it according to which of them was more powerful in history. No matter what, the destructive power of a heroic existence was shocking. As someone who also had a heroic template, Lord Howl had already used Bloodhowl to dismantle 5 warships of various sizes by the time the Windrunner sisters arrived. Grom didn't let his guard down at all just because the 2 beautiful elven rangers were dainty and delicate. On the contrary, his instincts towards the strong made Grom very nervous. It was as if he was a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water. His ability to jump over the transport ships and even the junk floating on the sea was beyond Grom's imagination. This level of agility was unheard of. Grom Hellscream felt a wave of disgust. This was the unique aesthetics of the orcs. The Windrunner sisters were as beautiful as goddesses in the eyes of humans, but in the eyes of the orcs, who loved broad shoulders, thick waists and large hips, they were weak goods that couldn't give birth to strong children. Lord Howl's disdainful gaze made Aurelia the Great Demon King and Queen Sylvanas even more displeased. Humph. 6 nostrils and 3 heroes snorted coldly. It had to be said that this was a strange misunderstanding. It didn't matter. Only a dead enemy was the best enemy. This principle was applicable in every world. Since they didn't speak the same language, there was no need to greet each other. The Windrunner sisters and Lord Howl faced each other directly. They moved forward on the waves so fast that the naked eye couldn't keep up with them. The Windrunner sisters stood on the left and right. They shot a barrage of arrows while approaching Lord Howl at high speed. Grom grabbed a stack of shields hanging on the railing of the ship. He easily tore the ropes binding the shields. They were originally used by humans for boarding battles, but Lord Howl pulled them up. 5 or 6 shields turned into flying discs that could cut a human in half and were thrown out. Of course, such a rough throw wouldn't hit. Sylvanas actually took a step forward with her slender and beautiful legs, stepping on those floating shields and flying high up in the sky. In just 10 seconds, Grom was hit by at least 30 arrows. He looked bloody and miserable, but the Windrunner sisters realized that none of the arrows actually penetrated Grom's muscles or hit his organs. The arrows that were aimed at Grom's fatal spots were either blocked or dodged by Blood Howl. Just as the Windrunner sisters were within 5 meters of Grom, Lord Howl counterattacked. A deafening roar spread out like a shockwave around the sinking ship, and the 2 sisters trembled. The next moment, the wooden boards under Lord Howl's feet turned to dust. With a swift leap, he slashed at Sylvanas. Chapter 258. Lord Howl's leap slash was unscientific. In a fantasy world with all kinds of special skills, talking about science was bullsh*t. It looked like a simple leap and fall, but whether it was going up or down, it had nothing to do with the acceleration of gravity. Blood Howl, its blazing red light shot into the sky. For a moment, it was like a scarlet sun had suddenly appeared out of nowhere. It was shocking and dazzling. The next moment, Grom, who held the axe with both hands, slashed down like a falling meteor. Speed up. Speed up. Speed up continuously. Insanely fast speed up. A moment ago, Grom was still about 10 meters away from Sylvanas. It felt like Queen Sylvanas could easily dodge with a light stomp of her feet. In the next moment, the sharp tip of the axe had already chopped down on a few strands of Queen Syriana's bangs that were leaking out of her hood. At this moment, the sharp whistle of the axe cutting through the air had just spread. This attack broke the speed of sound. This was the attack that the Hellscream family was famous for. Lord Howl's father had used this attack to kill countless ogres and Gollin. Lord Howl himself would also kill the night elf demigod Cenarius and the demon lord of the abyss, Manaroth, who was even bigger than the heavy truck Duque was in before he transmigrated. No. When Duque, who was in the command center, saw this scene through the magician's eye that had been monitoring the battlefield, he was so shocked that he stood up abruptly. Cold sweat instantly soaked his entire back. Could it be that Queen Sylvanas, who was supposed to shine brightly on the stage of the world of Azeroth in the future, would fall here? It was still World War II at the Dark Portal. There was no Doomsday Army at all. It could be said that Queen Sylvanas' death here was death. She would never be reincarnated. Unless Duque did not dare to imagine it. However, in his nervousness and shock, Duque had forgotten someone, Aurelia. As the big sister of the Windrunner family, how could she let her sister die in front of her? Indeed, Sylvanas was still immature. She was far from the all-powerful Dark Ranger and Queen of the Undead in the future, who could shake the world with a stomp of her foot. This was the reason why Duque had asked the 2 sisters to deal with Master Ho in the name of the Alliance's deputy marshal. Aurelia raised her leg and kicked Queen Sylvanas in the butt, allowing her to narrowly avoid the attack. Blood Howl was still slashing down. Seeing that she could not hit Aurelia, Queen Sylvie was about to chop off one of Aurelia's legs. Illyria's battle-hardened experience came into play. In that split second, she used the 3 arrows in her right hand to stab Grom's face. At the same time, the muscles on her abdomen bulged. She used her waist strength to turn her kick into a whip kick towards Grom's knee. Perhaps Grom could chop off one of Aurelia's legs. However, the price was that Master Ho's face would be pierced by 3 arrows. This was a fighting style that traded injuries for lives. Grom's expression changed and a serious expression appeared on his rugged face. He didn't expect that such a delicate and strange human could actually have such a ferocious fighting style. He finally realized that it wouldn't be that easy to win. Grom cancelled his jump slash. The muscles on his arm bulged and he swung a whirlwind slash, instead of a slash. In the blink of an eye, a violent tornado appeared. All the surrounding wood was chopped into sawdust and even the seawater was sucked away. Grom looked like a small tornado on the ocean. The Windrunner sisters jumped away swiftly. "Sister, are you all right?" Servanas knew that her carelessness had dragged her sister into this. She couldn't help but look at Aurelia's leg, which had been cut into pieces and was bleeding. Aurelia's face twitched. She wanted to comfort her sister and say that she was fine, but in the end she said in high elf language, "I'm fine, but I'll be a little slower." Orcs had thick skin and flesh, so they were fine even after being hit by dozens of arrows. However, for the Windrunner who relied on speed and agility for a living, being a little slower could mean the difference between life and death. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that Grom's strong physique allowed him to make many mistakes. If the Windrunner sisters made one mistake, they would be doomed eternally. Gritting her teeth, Queen Sylvanas said coldly, "Sister, cover him from afar." Even though she was a little worried, this was the only way. While Grom's whirlwind slash was over, Servanas slung her longbow and unsheathed her sword. Aurelia, on the other hand, opened up a distance of 20 meters and covered her sister with a continuous barrage of shots. In the command center, Duque finally relaxed when he saw that the Windrunner sisters and Hellscream were evenly matched. This was an exchange of chess pieces. Duque suddenly had an idea. He wasn't afraid of the orcs attacking with a large army, but what if a few powerful chiefs came? Although there was only one Hellscream, there were many talented orcs and Grom Hellscream wasn't the only one. There were also Gujar and Samuro. Samuro. Duque suddenly realized where his weakness was. Tyrion Fordring. Unsure why Duque would call his name without Uther, Tyrion, who was ready to go down the mountain at any time, stepped forward. "Yes. I'm worried about General Lang Rin at the front lines. I need you to go there immediately and follow General Lang closely during this battle." Bodyguard. Tyrion's face was a little gloomy. In his opinion, a paladin should be the kind of person who charged and broke through enemy lines, not a bodyguard. Duque's voice came again. "I suddenly remembered that the orcs have a special class called Blade Master. They have a stealth ability similar to thieves, but they move faster and seem to have some kind of strange power when they attack. Tyrion, this is a heavy responsibility. If something happens to General Lang, it will be a heavy blow to not only the battle for South Shore but the entire alliance. If you go this time, no matter what happens, I will remember you." Understood. Duque's transfer was a matter of life and death. Ryan was wearing a golden helmet and armor. Although he could arouse the courage of the Stormwind soldiers, his existence was also very conspicuous to the tribe. Just as a sword suddenly slashed at Lang from behind, Tyrion arrived. Holy shock. One of the few long-range attacks of a paladin. The attack came at the most needed time and place. The sneak attack stunned the Blade Master for a moment. It was also at this moment that Lang and General Tom realized what was going on. Two intersecting swords slashed at the blurry figure that was gradually becoming clearer. However, this Blade Master obviously didn't give up. Blade Storm suddenly rolled up. Chapter 259. It was another tornado-like attack, but compared to Grom's whirlwind slash, the Blade Storm was the real tornado, the real killer move. A terrifying tornado made of blood and wind swept up from the top of the mountain. Under the high-speed rotation, whether it was Theon, Lang, or Tom, they all lost track of the mysterious sword saint who had ambushed them. They could barely see a green figure spinning at high speed in the turbulent air currents. As Lang retreated with his sword, the Wang family guards beside him rushed forward without any regard for their own lives. The result was that the guards were instantly minced into meat paste. Looking at the familiar faces he had known for many years being killed by the sword, Lang almost wanted to rush into the storm of sword energy and fight it out with the other party. Tom Seamus slammed backwards, using his sturdy pauldrons to push Lang out of the blade storm, killing range. However, the other party chased after him like a shadow, determined to kill Lang. This was no longer a swordsmanship. The high-speed rotation of his body brought with it countless sword energies that were like real swords, slashing horizontally at everything that tried to block his way. The human bodies clad in standard iron armor, the thickened shields wrapped in wooden planks, the trenches dug around the mountain and the stone pillboxes, everything looked so sturdy. However, all these seemingly indestructible things had become victims of the blade storm, terrifying meat grinder. The human body was cut into pieces, and even if it was picked up, it would not know how to piece it back together. The shield was cut into pieces. The trenches were instantly opened up. And the stone pillbox was directly lifted off the roof. The attack of this berserk sword saint was completely beyond human imagination. At this moment, Lang suddenly calmed down and accepted reality. He was very grateful to Tyrion Fordring, who came at the last moment, and he knew very well that he was sent by Duque at a critical moment. But this kind of power was not something a mortal could resist, right? Listening to the high-speed cutting sound, Lang helplessly closed his eyes with a bitter smile. 1 second. 2 seconds. 5 seconds. The blade that represented death never came. Instead, it emitted an intense sound of metal clashing not far from him. Theon's tall and burly figure stood in front of him, and Seamus like a nail. The storm of blades slashed at him. Countless swords on his body? Dismember the corpse into 10,000 pieces? None of this happened. Instead, Lang saw an oval cover that glowed with a holy golden light appear on Theon's body. It was this shield that withstood the seemingly invincible blade storm. Was this really a god? Looking at the System Elf's report, Duque was a little confused. Congratulations, Tyrion Fordring, who you urgently dispatched to the eastern battlefield, saved King Lang at the critical moment with blessing of sacrifice and divine protection. King Lang's attitude towards you has risen to entrust life and death. Duque knew what it meant, but Duque was more interested in Theon's two skills. Blessing of sacrifice. Use the power of the holy light to protect an ally, so that the user of the blessing bears a portion of any kind of damage. Divine protection. Stimulate the holy light in the body, using the power of the holy light to make oneself immune to all attacks for a few seconds. The holy light in this world seemed to be more powerful than he had imagined. On the other side, seeing that he couldn't kill Lang even with his ultimate move, the mysterious sword saint reluctantly retreated. His figure disappeared into thin air. After using his ultimate move, he would probably fall into a period of weakness for a long time. That kind of terrifying move, which concentrated all of his strength for a few days in an instant, would not come without a price. He wouldn't have to worry about that guy for a long time. At this time, in the image of the mage's eyes, he saw that Duque had sent Theon to save King Lang. There was a burst of applause in the command center. That's amazing. Vice Commander. Oh my god, how did you think of that? Duque was flattered because this was praise from the 5 kings of the Alliance. Although he had saved his boss, saving Lang was also helping these kings. With a great enemy in front of them, no one wanted the Alliance to fall apart. Well, now we just need to. Before Duque finished speaking, he saw a hunchbacked figure appear in the vision of the mage's eyes. In the next instant, the mage's eyes was destroyed. However, Duque saw that on the 2 hilltops closest to the port, 2 fire rain areas the size of 4 football fields had fallen. A fire rain area the size of 8 football fields. Was this done by an ordinary warlock? Duke and Antonidas looked out of the window at the same time, looking at the burning hills in the distance and the people on fire who were writhing in pain. Those little people on fire in their field of vision were the elites of the Alliance. On top of the hill, the volume of the screams suddenly doubled and then quickly quieted down. And on the beach, naturally, the cheers of the orcs burst out. With the help of the System Elf, a figure that was originally just a small black dot rapidly expanded in Duque's vision, and expanded again and again. It was a hunchbacked orc holding an evil skull staff. His face was old, his movements unsteady, and his back was full of huge bone spikes. It felt like this guy didn't need anyone to touch him, he might throw himself to his death on the road in the next second. But no matter who Duque looked down on, he wouldn't look down on this mysterious orc who used water float to stand on the waves, his body swaying up and down with the waves. He was the terrifying existence that stood at the end of the path of evil in the mortal world. The muscles on Duque's face kept twitching, and his face was ashen as he squeezed out 3 words with great difficulty. Ghoul, Dan. Duque was absolutely sure that the historical ghoul, Dan, did not participate in the Battle of the Hillsbrad Hills. He didn't know if it was because the butterfly Duque had changed the course of fate too much, but it actually attracted Ghoul, Dan. The only thing he could rejoice about now was that Ghoul, Dan was no longer that demigod Ghoul, Dan. After being tricked by Medivh Ghoul, Dan's strength had dropped by at least half. Unfortunately, even if Gul Dan's strength had dropped by half, he was still not someone that the Sky Wizard Duque could contend against. Duque walked over to Antonidas and bowed deeply. Apologies, Chairman Antonidas. The other party was once a demigod warlock, the strongest orc in the mysterious domain Gul Dan. Other than you, only Kuel Salus Sun King can contend against him. Facing the expectant gazes from all directions, Antonidas leaned on his staff and stroked his long white beard, his face filled with the pride of a strong person. Haha. The Dalajan will not refuse responsibility. The same goes for the Dalajan chairman. Chapter 260. Duque heaved a sigh of relief when Antonidas agreed to fight. Gul Dan's appearance really made Duque feel like he was in a dog's den. Duque knew that a treacherous fellow like Gul Dan would not work for Orgrim wholeheartedly. However, there were some enemies in this world that even if you knew they wouldn't be serious, you still had to deal with them with all your might. This was a boss, this was power. Duque looked at Gul Dan's arrogant figure and bit his lips. After he was done with this, he really had to cultivate his strength properly. His strength had to match the situation. Duque knew that even as a Breaking Dawn wizard he would not be able to survive an attack from hundreds of thousands of beastmen. Moreover, he was not one yet. Without the support of the Alliance, even if he had the strength of a god, he would still be overwhelmed to death. In the future, Antonidas had died here, as had the Sun King Anastrian Sunstrider. Fortunately, Duque was not the one who had to face Gul Dan head-on today. Antonidas lightly waved his staff in the air. Without anyone seeing how he chanted an incantation, mysterious runes formed a long line in the air in front of them. 3 seconds later, this line was stretched open by some mysterious power, turning into an oval that allowed one person to pass through. On the other side of the circle of light was the empty gate of South Shore. That was the gate that connected the docks to South Shore. The beastmen were not idiots. They knew that if they did not get rid of the humans on the 2 hills and rushed into the town, they would just be sending themselves to their deaths. Under the scolding of the tribe's commanders, the beastmen all charged towards the hills. In the midst of the intense battle, there was an empty patch of land. The next moment, Antonidas appeared alone at the gates of the town. Oh, I didn't think there would be a human wizard who would dare to fight. Gul Dan muttered in the human language 200 meters away. However, he knew that Antonidas would hear him. I also want to know what kind of strength the demigod once had. Antonidas was old and shrewd. It seemed to be a compliment, but in fact, it was an outright insult. Gul Dan waved his magic staff and death ripples formed from the power of darkness spread out from the surface of the sea. Instantly, countless fishmen 100 meters away were hit. For a moment, the entire surface of the sea surged. Large amounts of blood and corpses were boiling and roaring like boiling water. Gul Dan's face was black as he coldly replied, "I can kill you even with half of my strength. Come." Antonidas beckoned. Without further ado, the 2 men's spells collided in mid-air. At that moment, the whole of South Shore, with the dock as the boundary, flashed with elemental light of different colors. On the side close to the town, fire, ice, and arcana runes of 3 different colors appeared densely. With the dock as the boundary, the side close to the sea flashed with overlapping crimson flames and black shadow magic formations, and they also contained a large amount of mysterious and evil aura. 2 completely different scenes occupied the center of the battlefield, completely enveloping the whole of South Shore and spreading in all directions. The next moment, the spells that poured out from the magic formations around the 2 men collided. The destructive flames and bone-chilling ice collided fiercely in midair. The ice shards and the aftermath of the flames formed a terrifying steam that roasted any creature that tried to get close to it. The evil shadow arrows were scattered by the fireballs, dyeing the nearby grass black, and the vitality of all the plants and animals that came into contact with them instantly withered. The aftermath of the scattered flames was not inferior in any way. It easily burned everything that could be burned. The azure arcane radiance violently shot at the curses that were mysteriously drifting over, rendering the warlock's most mysterious pain attribute curses useless. The battle between these 2 was even more terrifying than the battle of 10 wizard squads. The shockwaves of the fierce battle easily swept through the town. Duque had long since decided to make South Shore the main battlefield, and he had long since moved the residents away. However, seeing these two freakishly powerful people fight, Duque was still overwhelmed with shock. After all, this was not even Zhou Xian at his peak. Even now, Zhou Xian still had to use more than half of his power to maintain the darkness portal. In other words, Zhou Xian had used less than a quarter of his power to fight Antonidas, one of the two Breaking Dawn wizards in the world of Azeroth, to a draw. At this moment, the whole of South Shore as well as the places between the two hills seemed to have encountered a terrifying natural disaster. It was a combination of a tornado and an earthquake. The brick and wood houses on both sides of the main road above the town collapsed like dominoes. Huge trees were thrown into the air by the powerful shockwaves, but before they landed, they would be bombarded by 2 or 3 different kinds of magic. Duque saw with his own eyes the top half of a tree being burned, the bottom half frozen and finally turned into powder by the shadow arrows. Antonidas raised his staff, and the sea around Zhou Xian was instantly interwoven with a blue magical radiance. In less than half a second, nearly 100 giant water elementals with 2 thick arms and their upper bodies in the shape of an inverted triangle suddenly appeared from the sea. These water elementals did not say anything, and directly shot over 100 frost arrows at Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian also waved his hand, and dozens of dark blue inverted triangular blue fatties appeared beside him. These strange demons that came from the void used their huge bodies as the best magic shields. At the same time, near the town gate, a spatial passage connected to the void was opened, and many demon hounds that targeted magic professions pounced out, charging straight at Antonidas. Humph. The Dalajan president snorted coldly. Countless ice spikes appeared from the ground and pierced into the sky. The demon hounds that should have been able to suppress mages had no resistance against the physical damage caused by the elemental transformation. As if they were skewered, their abdomens were easily pierced from the bottom up. Some of them even had their heads cut off by the ice, and they became corpses before they could rise up. The magic energy that burst out of their bodies formed a terrifying pressure. This kind of pressure could easily draw an invisible boundary on the battlefield. Even if there were no magic waves in that area, those who were not strong enough would not dare to cross it. Seeing that Duque's arrangement had once again offset the horde's attack, Lothar walked over. "What are you waiting for, Duque?" "I'm waiting for the exchange. When the horde's cards are gone, it will be the death of the 100,000 horde troops," Duque said coldly. Chapter 261. Everyone in the command center's eyes lit up. They didn't know how many soldiers the horde had left. Adding the 100,000 orcs here and the ones intercepted by Dalen's fleet, it was definitely a heavy blow to the horde. From the looks of it, the humans wouldn't lose more than 20,000 people. No matter how one looked at it, this was a great victory that only happened once in a century. Duque had just retracted his gaze from the Windrunner sisters, who were evenly matched with Master Howl. He was shocked to find that the battle between the strongest sorcerer of Azeroth and the strongest sorcerer of Draenor had already come to an end. It was a draw. Antonidas and Zhou Xian clutched at their wounds. The left shoulder of Antonidas' sorcerer robe had been burned. A black rune with an evil aura was wriggling on Antonidas' old body. Antonidas was using arcane energy to dispel the rune, but it wasn't very effective. On the other side, Zhou Xian had also been hit. A huge ice prism had pierced through his left shoulder. From the wound, ice patterns spread toward Zhou Xian's heart like a spider web. Zhou Xian injected the destructive flames in his hand into his shoulder to resist the invasion of the cold. "I'll spare your life today. Next time I'll leave your filthy head behind." The two of them turned around and left without hesitation. Antonidas reluctantly teleported back to the command center. Zhou Xian waved his hand and turned into a cloud of black fog, disappearing from the sea. "Master, how are you? Either come and help." The place where Antonidas was covered started to emit thick darkness. The sticky black aura had a strong sense of ominous, and it tried to drill into the depths of the old magician's body and corrode his magic circuits. Fortunately, Uther's holy light was even brighter. Even though sweat was dripping from his forehead, Uther spent about 5 minutes to completely dispel the darkness. "Thank you. It seems like the Holy Knight is a great profession," Antonidas praised sincerely. Antonidas praised from the bottom of his heart. He then turned to Duke. "What a terrifying orc warlock. I'm no match for him. If I go all out, I'll definitely be the one to die. At most, I'll only be able to injure him moderately. I don't know why he's pretending to be heavily injured. All I can say is that he'll need at most a week to recover, but I might not be able to fight for the Alliance by then. Don't worry. He won't come again. Duque said with absolute certainty. Are you sure? Yes. Duque turned to look at Crassus in the Dalajan crowd. Please send Mr. President back to the Dalajan first, and then ask Archbishop Fao to go to the Dalajan and check Mr. President thoroughly. It would have been best to send Antonidas to Lord Darren. Due to political reasons, Antonidas would rather stay in his old nest to recuperate. Crassus quickly opened a portal, connected it to the Dalajan and sent Antonidas away. Not long after, Crassus opened a portal and hurried back. The orcs were not stupid. After their several charges were repelled, no matter how stupid they were, they realized that with so many people crowded on the coast, sooner or later they would be wiped out. They gave up the blind attack and seemed to be waiting for something. Duque's pupils suddenly shrank to the size of a needle's eye. It's here. It's finally here. Duque stood up and slammed his hand on the table. Pass the order. All cavalry regiments are ready to launch a countercharge against the enemy along the established route. All reserves are to enter combat positions with the spear team and the javelin team as the main force. It was finally their turn. In the command center, a group of tough generals had been waiting impatiently. If it weren't for Duque's magnificent command suppressing the tribes time and time again, maybe some kings would have protested. Now with Duque's order, more than half of the people in the command center left. As he walked down the hill, Uther was a little puzzled. General Lothar, are we going to counterattack from the ruins of South Shore to the coast? I'm still wondering about this order. Are there any cavalry on the tribe's side? I don't think there's anything in the tribe that can stop your cavalry regiment and my silver hand. General Haas, the commander of Alterac, was also puzzled. It's even more strange on my side. They actually want my Eagle Knights to attack the enemy along the slope of the East Hill, which is not too steep. The Eagle Knights are indeed mountain knights, and they are also used to fighting in complex terrain. But I see that General Lang's infantry is also doing well. I can't think of a reason for reinforcements. Lothar smiled. It was an extremely sunny smile. Can you write 10 or 20 reports at the same time? No, Uther answered truthfully. How is that possible? Haas asked rhetorically. But I know that strong mages have the metamagic ability, multicasting. That is, the ability to do two things at the same time or even many things. Duque is such a genius he can quickly read many times more reports than we do. He also often finds a lot of details that we don't notice. For those threats that he is uncertain about, he will make preparations, but because he can't convince everyone, he will be used to silence. Lothar paused and continued. However, it has been proven again and again that the preparations he has made and the backup he has arranged are correct and effective. Even if I don't want to admit it, I have to admit that he is above me in terms of the overall situation and the art of command. If he were a melee professional, maybe he would be the commander-in-chief. What Lothar said was another fact of this era. People who regarded chivalry as the supreme tended to admire melee heroes more than the mysterious and unpredictable spellcasters. More people subconsciously believed that only those who fought head-on were real men. 10 minutes later, the signal to attack came. Many new creatures appeared on the coast, much taller than the orcs. Except for a few orcs who could be more than 3 meters tall, the orcs were generally about 2.5 meters tall. But these creatures could easily reach a height of about 4 meters. Ogres. These huge creatures joined the battle. They waved giant sticks that looked like uprooted trees. They roared and rushed up the hill. Bows and javelins were useless. Even if a dozen spears pierced the bodies of the ogres, they wouldn't be able to end the lives of these ferocious monsters unless they pierced their vitals. And every time the giant wooden sticks were swung, a bunker was smashed and an entire row of shield soldiers was smashed away. The shield wall that the humans relied on to fight against the orcs became the biggest fatal weakness, which allowed the ogres to cause massive casualties with every blow. Apart from the ballistae and cannons on the top of the hill, there was nothing that could stop the march of these giant creatures. The soldiers were defeated by this powerful blow. The orc soldiers attacked through those gaps and quickly spread out, sweeping up the alliance soldiers in the trenches. A group of figures wearing heavy cloaks and riding heavily armored warhorses appeared on the slightly dilapidated pier, each horse's eyes shining with dazzling red light. Chapter 262. The Eagle Knights led by Haas attacked the horde along the river at the foot of the eastern hill. Now that Antonidas and Gul'dan were no longer in the way, in order to attack the eastern mountain in a more comprehensive manner, many tribes first came to the river bank and then took a detour to attack the mountain from the side. When the Eagle Knights arrived, the defensive line on the hill was already very tight. On the front line, Tyrion and General Tom could often be seen leading the reserves as firefighters to fill in the gaps in the position. From time to time, even Lang had to personally lead the troops into battle. The only good thing was that Stormwind's reserves were quite sufficient. It was just that the casualty ratio was shocking. It was under these circumstances that the Eagle Knights circled around to the flank of the horde attacking the hill. "Level your spears," Haas shouted. The knights lowered their nearly 4-meter-long spears and urged their mountain horses to charge from the side. Alterax's Eagle Knights weren't heavy cavalry in the traditional sense. Considering the mountainous terrain, the armor of this group of knights was between light cavalry and heavy cavalry. They didn't have heavy armor, only light chain mail and a layer of leather armor. The war horses were also only equipped with a piece of leather armor. On the complicated terrain of the river and the hills, the Eagle Knights performed quite well. With the heavy sound of hooves, the knights quickly scattered, looking for their own targets. When the target was more than 2 meters away, they had already stabbed their spears, hitting the enemy's vitals. At the same time, the momentum of the war horses pierced deep into the enemy's body. At the same time, the well-designed spear couldn't withstand the powerful reaction force and began to explode to the side. The unlucky ones who were stabbed fell to the ground, and the knights casually abandoned the remaining half of the spear, pulled out Alterax's special double-edged broadsword, and slashed at the horde's warrior's neck. The quick charge cut off the horde's fierce attack. But Haas didn't stop. He took his men around the beach and quickly retreated from the river. The cavalry that had lost their speed couldn't even be compared to the infantry when faced with the tall orcs. Moreover, in that kind of fierce battle, the Eagle Knights suffered a lot of losses. The regular forces were dealt with by the regular troops. Transcendent monsters were naturally dealt with by the insanely strong paladins. Uther, who was charging forward, quickly saw the opponent that Duque had almost tailor-made for them. They covered their faces with scarves so only their eyes could be seen. Each of them carried a huge 2-handed sword. The cavalry from Lordaeron treated them like fools and were prepared to teach them a lesson with their spears. In the rules of cavalry, it was common sense to charge at each other with a lance. Using a heavy sword against a lance, this was the only way. In their hearts, they were praising their luck, and were prepared to make use of the advantage of their lances to take down the enemy. Wuther heard countless unfamiliar buzzing sounds. 30 meters away, the charging cavalrymen fell to the ground in front of these guys. Even the cavalrymen of the Rotterdam kingdom who did not fall to their deaths on the spot did not draw their swords to attack the moment they got up. Instead, they felt as if they were about to bleed from their 7 orifices as they clutched their heads tightly with both hands. "Ah!" The cavalrymen rolled on the ground in pain and let out inhuman howls. "In the name of the holy light." Wuther witnessed all this with his own eyes. At this moment he completely understood why Duque wanted the Silverhand Knights to fight against these cloaked guys. These are demons. They are using evil magic to attack us. After saying that, Wuther raised his warhammer high. Several holy seals were added to the warhammer, and the top of the warhammer emitted a silver light like the moon. "Stand up, soldiers!" Wuther shouted in his loud voice. "The holy light will drive away the darkness, but you must use your weapons to defend your honor." Dazzling light spread from the warhammer, echoing the bright light of dawn, and instantly driving away the darkness from the land. The holy light shone on the warriors, and when the cloaked men raised their hands again, not a single one of them fell. Although the people who got up and the cavalry behind them were still a little scared, when they found that no one fell, they mustered their courage again and let out a deafening roar, charging towards the cloaked knights. However, at the moment of fighting, not only the cavalrymen but even Wuther was stunned. This was because this group of guys were wearing the standard armor of the Stormwind cavalry. The only difference was that they used the spiked pauldrons commonly used by tribal warriors. "No. Why?" a Rotterdam cavalry screamed. During the days of gathering in South Shore, they had been repeatedly asked by their officers to identify the equipment of the various allies. They could not accept suddenly finding their allies standing on the opposite side of the enemy. While they were in a daze, many of them fell to the ground. Wother saw the other party's face clearly again. Their faces were pale, lifeless and bloodless. A pair of evil blue eyes glowed with clear hostility. Most importantly, Wother did not feel any life from them. Blasphemy! The filthy tribal warlocks actually resurrected the dead into living corpses? Silverhand, defeat them. Wother waved his huge two-handed hammer and easily knocked a Death Knight off his undead warhorse. Abundant golden holy light poured into the Death Knight's body, and the guy was blown to pieces by the holy light before he reached the ground. The Alliance soldiers cheered again, encouraged by the amazing skills and power of the paladin. Turalian, who was at the rear, felt very conflicted. As a paladin, he should be with them, but as Lothar's adjutant, he should stay in the center of South Shore and accompany Lothar to command. The battle between the paladin and the Death Knight began, and neither side could gain the upper hand. At the beginning, Wother killed 4 or 5 Death Knights in a row, but he immediately met his opponent. A tall guy who claimed to be Terran Gorfiend actually withstood Wother's attack. Turalian saw a Death Knight grab Dathrahan's arm with one hand when they were competing in strength. That hand that looked like a corpse radiated darkness. However, Dathrahan used the holy light to dispel the darkness. Immediately after, Dathrahan took advantage of the moment when that guy retracted his hand and directly hit his head with his hammer. Their skulls shattered like broken porcelain. Turalian noticed that there was not a drop of blood flowing out of the skull. It was all dry brain matter. On the other hand, the Death Knights were able to win against the normal Alliance cavalry. Turalian suddenly noticed the signal coming from the hill. Chapter 263. The Death Knights and Ogres were indeed 2 big cards. If they were ambushed by these 2 troops, the Alliance would definitely suffer heavy casualties. As a transmigrator, Duque remembered at least 70% to 80% of history. When a surprise attack was no longer a surprise attack, the so-called surprise attack would only be a joke. Duque raised his hands and waved his index fingers at the sky. Windsor immediately understood. Send my order, the Dalajan mages get ready. Your Excellency Kel, Thuzad? Your Excellency Krasis? No problem. We've been ready for a long time. Both of them replied affirmatively through the magic communication. Below, the 2 cavalries fighting fiercely on the ruins of South Shore were already fighting for real. Send my order to retreat. Turalian shouted to the nearest messenger. He knew that this person would use his horn to spread the order. Cover each other. Retreat outside the town and regroup. The soldier nodded and raised his horn. He blew it twice, then another long horn. After hearing this, the squad leader began to shout orders to his own team to gather their soldiers. In fact, it was not easy, especially in a chaotic situation where both sides were entangled. Fortunately, the Rotterdam cavalry had made arrangements early in the morning, and their tactical execution was quite good. They took out chain-flying hammers that looked like hinges used for cannons. These little things with 2 round metal balls connected by chains in the middle was a simplified version of a tripwire. They were thrown directly at the leg of the Death Knight's horse. Under the effect of inertia, the small ball would naturally spin around the horse's leg. Regardless of whether it was a dead horse or a flaming horse, its speed would still be reduced. Most of the cavalries got rid of their opponents. The Hand of Silver was in charge of the rear position. The Death Knights who did not receive new orders chose to pursue. Just as the Alliance cavalry pulled away from the Death Knights, bright lights flashed on both sides of the hills. The Dalajan mages. Even when the main battlefield was at its most critical, Duque did not send out these killing weapons like the Pharaoh. Even when the Ogre mages appeared on the battlefield and beat up the mages of the Storm King family and the Rotterdam Kingdom on the 2 hills, Duque did not use them at all. Good steel should be used on the blade's edge. In Duque's opinion, a battle of attrition between a mage and a warlock was too boring. If he wanted to use it, he would use it to eliminate the enemy's elites. This was only the second battle at the Dark Portal. Before the Doomsday Army came out, the Death Knights of the Horde were very valuable. Although the bodies of these Death Knights belonged to Stormwind City, their souls were those of Ghoul Dan's warlocks who were killed by Orgrim. Only these warlocks could allow newborn Death Knights to easily grasp dark magic. It doesn't matter if these warlocks are high-ranked warlocks or apprentice warlocks, in any case one dead is one less. As long as they die here, paladins can purify their souls. Even Ghoul Dan can't resurrect them as Death Knights. The name of the battle this time was Beastman's Blood. With the amplification of the battle magic formation, the power and range of each mage's magic were greatly increased. The money spent on this magic formation alone was enough to equip an infantry regiment of 5,000 people. It was all worth it. The huge fireball that blotted out the sky and covered the earth poured down from the hills on both sides, leaving long trails of flames behind. That spectacular scene made countless people raise their eyebrows. Even the retreating Rotterdam cavalry and paladins of the Silver Hand couldn't help but be tongue-tied. It was too magnificent. The fireballs that poured down from both sides were like two huge waterfalls of fire, easily crossing the distance of hundreds of meters and blasting towards the Death Knights. The fireballs fell on the ruins of South Shore like a torrential rain, causing an effect that exceeded everyone's imagination. South Shore, which had become incomparably dilapidated after the battle between Antonidas and Ghoul Dan, was now injected with the elemental life force called flames and came to life. Everything surged with flames and everything they touched was violently dyed in the color of flames, forming a scene that seemed like the end of the world. At first, the Death Knights who had lost their senses were still chasing the Alliance cavalry on their undead warhorses, but soon they were drowned by the explosion. The terrifying explosion plowed through the ruins of South Shore again. After a round of attacks, there was nothing left to continue standing in the flames. Ha! Perish dirty bones. Really go to hell, don't stand up again. The Rotterdam cavalry vented their frustrations from being suppressed just now. Even with the blessing of Uther's holy light, they could not fight like real paladins after all. That had nothing to do with combat skills, and was purely suppressed by the evil power of the enemy. Now they vented to their heart's content. Boo, boo, boo. The horn sounded. It was a signal for all the cavalrymen to retreat. We're still retreating. Turayan frowned. Noxus laughed. Duque is really greedy, but I like it. On the other side, Duque contacted Gina Goldsword directly through magic communication. Miss Goldsword, how's General Dalen? Duque asked urgently. Coming. Almost in response to Dalen's confident answer, the sails of Kurtula's fleet appeared in everyone's field of vision. The orcs were alarmed. Almost every orc commander realized that they were in big trouble. That's right, the coastline of South Shore was the widest, and the most suitable for a landing battle. The problem was that if they could not attack, the hundreds of thousands of orcs would all be squeezed on the narrow and long coastline. They would be the best targets for the fleet's cannons. On the flagship, seeing so many tribes squeezed on the coast, General Dalen was ecstatic. Open all the cannons and use the grape shot. I want these green-skinned creatures to go to hell. It was early in the morning and the wind was right. It was perfect for Kurtula's fleet, which used sails. The sail, which was originally just a tiny dot, rapidly expanded in everyone's field of vision. There was a sudden burst of cheers that could turn the entire world upside down. Hooray! Blast those bastard green-skinned creatures to death. Don't even think about charging over. Just stay down there and take the cannons. The orcs launched a desperate charge, trying to break through the defense line of the hill. Even the ogre mages were charging, but the Dalajan mages suppressed the ogre mages very well. Chapter 264. The Alliance soldiers stood tightly on the defensive line on the hill, holding their weapons steadily. Their spears were pointed diagonally downwards and stabbed at any approaching orcs. The soldiers formed a continuous shield wall, and the trained javelin soldiers kept throwing rain of death from the higher trenches. The orcs kept attacking these squads with absolute numbers, but they could not break through the Alliance's defensive line. At this moment the sound of cannons rang out in the distance. Duque clenched his fists in excitement. This was what he wanted. Artillery and infantry coordination. Land and sea coordination. These two concepts were completely foreign to the world of Azeroth, but to Duque, who was a transmigrator and a fan of the fake military, it was like a drizzle. The cannons of this era had very big limitations. These primitive breech-loading cannons had a short range and their power was limited. No general or marshal would have thought of asking the fleets that entered the battlefield later to help with the cannons. To the kings of the Alliance, as long as the Alliance could withstand this wave, it would be a very impressive victory. Who would have thought that Duque's appetite was so big that he actually wanted to swallow all 100,000 orcs? And it was about to come true. In the command center, the faces of the remaining 4 kings were filled with shock and awe. Cortires' complete First Fleet, the half-destroyed Third Fleet, the Fourth Fleet that was chased away by Lord Howl, and the Storm Fleet took advantage of Lord Howl's fight with the Windrunner sisters to approach the shore together. Their cannons were fully opened, and a sky full of bullets poured down on the shoreline that had turned green. A series of flashes quickly flashed across the ship in the distance, followed by rising black smoke that temporarily covered the entire ship. Here, every Alliance soldier had an excited heart beating in their chest. When King Lang saw thousands of black lines across the morning blue sky from the top of the hill, he even forgot to continue to encourage his soldiers. Those steel beads mixed with the blazing aura of gunpowder intertwined with each other in the air. In some places the steel beads were so densely packed that they actually collided with each other in the air, producing a series of crackling sounds. But there was no problem. It was as if God had scattered a large plate of black beans from the sky, sprinkling them on the beach with a piercing hum. Even though they knew that the next scene would be spectacular, the Storm Wind soldiers and the Rotterdam soldiers on the hill were still stunned by the scene in front of them. The terrifying shellfire plowed through the orcs on the beach. The place was originally crowded with green dwarves, but after a round of fire, only a few were left standing. A sieve-like formation appeared in front of the Alliance soldiers. Just as the Alliance soldiers thought that victory was at their fingertips, a voice suddenly rang out from the battlefield. It was a sentence that was continuously shouted out. Loch Terrigar, he would rather die than win. Tens of thousands of orcs recovered from their shock and shouted the same slogan. The wills of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of orcs converged into one, turning into a raging tide. Unfortunately, this tide was extinguished before it could reach the Alliance's camp. Pass my order, use the firewall technique. Duque ordered coldly. Dalaran's mages immediately released a high wall of flames on the hillside of the two Alliance mountains. Wall of Fire was not a spell with a good price-performance ratio. To maintain the wall of flames they had to constantly inject mana. 4 low-level mages, maintaining it for a few minutes would deplete all their mana. In most battles this spell was not very practical. However, at this crucial moment, the appearance of the firewall technique extinguished the last thoughts of the horde. The orc warriors were not paladins who could temporarily rely on the holy light to become invincible. How much combat power could they have if they risked their lives to charge through the firewall? This attack directly smashed the morale of the horde. Finally, the horde's retreat horn sounded. Retreat? How could it be so easy to retreat after landing on the beach? Duque did not know who the commander of the horde was this time, but he was sure that Orgrim was not here. However, it was not easy for the horde to retreat. Their only path of survival was in the direction of the east beach, because they knew that the Alliance's tight defense line was still there if they retreated to the west coast. Moreover, the sea facing the west coast was deep water. As long as Cortires' fleet was there, they would not be able to board the transport ship back alive. The east side was different. Even though the entire coast from South Shore to Tangarock in the southeast were guarded by Stormwind soldiers, the sea facing the east coast was shallow water with a depth of less than 3 meters. The Alliance's ships could not enter, and this was the horde's only hope. In fact, the horde was retreating in that direction, and the transport ship was also moving in that direction, ready to receive the horde's warriors. However, it was not that easy. Mogger, have your mare people go to the sea facing the east beach to snipe the orcs. Goo, yes master. Without waiting for Duque's order, Lothar personally led the cavalry to chase after the orcs when they retreated. This was a rare opportunity to beat the orcs when they were down. Other than Lang, who did not dare to advance too recklessly, who continued to defend his own hill and continued to attack the horde passing by, the bombardment had already extended to the east beach. On the hill to the west, Mograine and Abendis had already led their troops down like ferocious tigers, chasing after the horde's tail. On the entire battlefield, the battle was nearing its end. Looking down from the sky, the silver torrent representing the Alliance was in a semi-encirclement, chasing after the remaining green parts along the coastline. The horde had sent out many troops to cover the rear, but none of them could hold on for long. They were quickly torn apart by the fierce bombardment of the Alliance's long-range weapons and the fierce impact of the Alliance's army. They were quickly swallowed up by the human torrent. In the Alliance's command, thunderous cheers were heard. This was the first victory since the establishment of the Alliance, and it was also a rather great victory. Congratulations, Deputy Chief Marcus. The most excited king of Stormguard, Tolbane, was the first to shake hands with Duque. The Alliance's victory would undoubtedly greatly reduce the pressure on Riptide Fortress. No matter how good the defense of Solder Bridge was, being besieged every day was not a long-term solution. Thank you. Duque smiled. The second to come up was King Terina's. Sure enough, it's the world of the young now. Kalia misses you very much. Come to Lordaeron more often when you have time. The king of Lordaeron's words were clear. Duque forced a smile and nodded. Yes, I will definitely go when I have time. Yes, I am very busy. The third was King Xian. Now it's good, at least we taught those green-skinned creatures a lesson. I don't have to worry about waking up with a bunch of green-skinned creatures on the kingdom's beach. There are still many orcs, we need to continue working hard. The last was King Eden. This Alterac king had always given Duque the impression of being gloomy, cunning, and astute. Just as Eden was about to say something, a sudden change occurred. A sharp long sword pierced through Duque's chest. Chapter 265. You should be able to hear me, right? I'm sorry, I admire your wisdom, but if you don't die, the beastmen will not be able to rule this world. A quick and clear beastman language came from behind Duque. Every word entered Duque's ears, reminding Duque of who killed him. Fireblade. Clan. Duke's heart was completely cut in half by the sharp blade. He coughed up blood, and blood spurted out from the gaps between his teeth that were full of blood. You really know our tribe well. It seemed to be a sigh, but it also seemed to have made up its mind. With a twist of the blade, a cold light burst forth from Duke's chest, splitting Duke's entire body into two halves. King Alterac Eden was dumbfounded. Perhaps he was very resourceful and full of ideas, but he had never been a courageous and daring king. This was something all kings looked down on. Seeing the star of the Alliance, who was about to shake hands with him, suddenly killed, King Eden collapsed to the ground, tears and snot flowing out of his eyes. The other three kings were also stunned. Terina's was frozen in fear, while Jean and Salas pulled out their swords at lightning speed. More than 10 sounds rang out as if they were the same note. Inside the hall were the dignitaries of various countries. Although many generals had already left the mountain, the dignitaries never lacked guards. Unfortunately, these sounds came from the chests or throats of the guards. More than 10 guards were assassinated on the spot by the sudden appearance of the orc. Among all the guards, only Windsor and Gavin Rad activated divine protection to block this fatal blow. Even though there were over 1,000 guards in attendance outside the command center at this moment in this enormous command center, there were only the 4 kings, Windsor and Gavin Rad, left, a total of 6 living people. The king's pupils contracted as they finally saw their enemies. They were all tall with ferocious faces and protruding fangs. They carried large flags with domineering words on their backs, and held 3-foot-long burning blades in their hands. They were all sword saints of the Fireblade clan. They had crossed the entire battlefield in an unimaginable way and arrived at the headquarters of the Alliance, which was overlooking the ocean. There, they had planned a decapitation strategy. I was too careless. He was too careless. The impending victory had paralyzed everyone. The soldiers could not wait to participate in the pursuit and taste the first great victory of the human alliance against the orc tribe. No one had expected the other party to be so sinister. This was worse than the last time Ryan was ambushed. If more than half of the kings of the alliance fell here, the country that lost the king would inevitably fall into chaos, and the alliance would inevitably collapse. No matter what great victory Lothar achieved on the front line, it would not help. To the tribe, these sword saints of the Fireblade clan were so close to becoming heroes. Just a little bit more. The only thing they didn't expect was that Duque would be resurrected. The surrounding air instantly dropped to the freezing point, and a tornado-like blizzard appeared in the blink of an eye. The sword saints had long since realized that something was wrong, but the snowflakes in front of them were so large that they could not even see their own fingers. It had to be said that the leading sword saint was definitely a top-notch expert. He did not hesitate for even half a second and immediately pulled out Blade Storm. The sword saints of the Fireblade clan would definitely know how to deal with this move, but it was a different matter for humans. In such a narrow space there was no space to dodge at all, and it was not just one Blade Storm but more than 10. All the sword saints used their ultimate moves at the same time as if they had a tacit understanding. Even if these sword saints were not as powerful as the leading sword saint, the blade storm that was blasted out was not to be underestimated. Looking at the sword light that filled their vision, even though they knew that there was a mage protecting them, all the kings were scared out of their wits. Scram! A loud roar sounded like thunder from the sky, causing everyone's eardrums to ring. The next moment, the entire ground of the command center exploded with dozens of huge ice prisms. The kings suddenly felt as if they were in the middle of a snow-colored forest. They immediately came back to their senses and they had a question in their minds. Where were those damn sword saints of the orcs? The stone ceiling was pierced through by a large pile of ice prisms. The sword saints were also sent flying. Spin. Aren't you all very good at spinning? I'll let you guys spin around as much as you want. On the ground, Duke's figure appeared from the dissipating white fog, pointing at the sky and cursing. Yes, using one's high-speed spinning to create countless sword auras that were as sharp as blades was indeed very awesome. Don't forget, the blade storm of the sword saints came from spinning, and spinning required a fulcrum to stand on. What Duque did was to send all these fulcrum flying into the air. The sword saints were so depressed that they wanted to vomit blood. What happened to the promise of eating the king's heads together tonight? What happened to the promise of using their ultimate moves to destroy the heavens, the earth, and the air? The legendary ultimate move that would definitely cause a bloodbath had all become a fool's one-man show. It was not that they did not want to stop, but this kind of terrifying ultimate move that erupted all of their energy in an instant was not something that could be stopped easily. They also wanted to move away from the ice prisms under their feet and then slash at Duque. But the ice prisms under their feet continued to thicken and extend, not letting them fall. As a result, under the gaze of thousands of Alliance soldiers, the roof of the Alliance's headquarters was lifted off, and then more than a dozen small tornadoes of sword blades spun continuously in the air. It was not known whether this scene was terrifying or funny. This situation directly alarmed many soldiers who were chasing at the front lines. Not good. Every general's face was pale. Stop. Everyone return. Turayan shouted nervously. Wait. Noxus stopped Turayan's recklessness. What can we do if we go back now? Duque should be fine. If he's here. Almost at the same time, the mages responsible for communications around every general received a message from Duque. All the important personnel are fine. The headquarters is under attack. Praises. Thizad is back. Duque was very calm and very clear-headed. If he called for the cavalry to return now, they would definitely not make it in time. But the two pharaohs were another matter. A series of flash lights lit up on both sides of the mountain. There was no time to lock onto the coordinates of the teleportation, so the two famous pharaohs of the future used the fastest and most violent method, using flash continuously to hurry on their way. Low-ranked mages had to rest and adjust their magic circuits after each use of flash, but there were no such restrictions for Radiant Moon mages. While others could travel 20 yards with a blink, these two fellows could travel 200 yards with a single blink. Moreover, they didn't even need to pause. They were practically burning with anxiety. Originally, Duque had planned to hold out until the two of them returned, but Duque suddenly found an opportunity. Chapter 266. The system elf spoke, which was rare. Dear host, do you want to eat them alone? I've scanned them and found that they seem to have skill books that you can use. The system elf was connected to Duque's brain, and this kind of brainwave communication took almost no time. Skill book? Why would a mage like me need a blade master's skill book? I'm tired of carrying such a big kitchen knife. I don't know, but their energy fluctuations are similar to yours. If you can kill them alone, you might be able to extract the skill book from the energy in their bodies. Well, that's possible. At this moment, Duque was excited. Duque yelled loudly. What skills did a blade master have? There were so many blade master skills. But the core of a blade master were still those 4 skills. Gale Step could make a blade master invisible and increase his movement speed. If a blade master attacked a target while invisible, it would cause additional damage and reveal himself. This was much more powerful than a thief's invisibility. Mirror Image could create an illusion of a blade master to confuse the opponent and eliminate all unfavorable magic effects. Critical Strike could increase the probability of a blade master dealing more damage when attacking. Needless to say, Blade Storm, The rapidly rotating blades could easily injure all enemy ground troops in the vicinity, and also made the sword saint immune to magic. Any one of these 4 skills could bring great help to Duque. For a moment, great ambition surged into Duque's heart. Fight tycoons. Distribute land. Oh no. It should be, fight the boss. Rob his mother. At this moment, Duque's mind was unprecedentedly focused, completely from the greed in his heart, from the desire for power, and from the anger of being killed. It was a very magical and very strange slight distortion of the mind. He didn't even notice that a few things flashed in the system notification. Detected, greed, in its 7 major sins, activated. You have developed a strong greed for something. Due to your human nature, exploding state. Greed, changed from a negative soul state to a positive soul state. Transforming in progress. You have obtained temporary special abilities, plunder, and luck. Plunder. You can obtain more spoils of war from the enemies you kill. Note, this can be beyond the concept of physics. Luck. Even living enemies can become your luck. Because they are your potential for advancement. When luck is activated, you will get a higher chance of critical hits and better item drops. Duque didn't notice, he really didn't notice. He only knew that his magic had been activated. Just as the Blade Masters ended their Blade Storm, the Blade Masters were activated. A large amount of water elemental energy rushed into Duke's ice barrier, and with the help of rapid avalanche, the place where the Sword Saints were standing was turned into a giant ice ball that was held up by dozens of ice pillars. A translucent ice film sealed off all entrances and exits. Inside, the temperature was dropping rapidly. At the same time, a huge clockwise snowstorm swept up everything inside. The Sword Saints were so depressed that they vomited blood. Of all times, the enemy had unleashed it. That unreasonable ice tornado did not seem like something a sky wizard could do. It was a morning star, no, a radiant moon. They weren't strong in terms of freezing air. The problem was that Duque had placed a large number of palm-sized round ice flakes in the barrier. In terms of freezing air, it was not considered strong, but the problem was that Duque had placed a large number of palm-sized round ice shards inside the barrier, and under the sweeping of the ice storm, these ice shards all became the most lethal blades, crazily cutting their bodies. Under normal circumstances, the Blade Masters could have used all sorts of methods to avoid the attack before the spell was formed. However, Duque just had to wait for them to finish casting their ultimate spells. If it were any other enemy, they could have used Gale Steps to escape. But where could they run to now? Because they were weak, they were sucked into the ice storm and lost control of their own bodies. A Sword Saint was definitely an elite among the Beastmen. Compared to other Beastmen, a Sword Saint's attack power, speed, and agility were all maximized. Chopping down trees and boulders would only require 1 slash. In comparison, their defense and vitality were at the level of an ordinary human. After casting their ultimate spells, the Blade Master was even weaker than an ordinary human. The ice blades continuously created wounds on their bodies. Very soon, the first Blade Master lost his life. The second, the third. The leading Blade Master's eyes were bloodshot and he let out a ferocious roar. Loktaroger. Even though he was weak, even though his arms were sore and limp, even though every time he swung his blade he still attacked. Relying on his physique that was stronger than the other Sword Saints, he suddenly stepped on a piece of ice that was already floating in the air. Using the seemingly insignificant reaction force, he shot out of the ice shield's range like a falling meteor. Only you must die. There were countless bloodstains on the Blade Master's face. The wounds caused by the sharp ice blades were already covered with frost. Before he broke through the barrier, the ice blades cut his face again and again. The wounds on his chest were already disorderly, like a piece of rotten meat that was about to be chopped up. There was only a small section of the red flag left on his back. Only the long blade was still astonishingly bright. Only the remaining blood-red eye was surging with endless fighting spirit. Duque raised his head and calmly stared at the Blade Master who risked his life to launch a fatal attack on him. Duque suddenly admired him. Not everyone had the courage to enter the enemy's rear and kill the enemy's leader. Not everyone had the courage to launch a suicidal charge against the enemy when there was still a chance to escape. If he had chosen to escape, perhaps Duque might not have been able to catch him. But after seeing his brother die in battle, he chose to die together with Duque. He was a hero. Unfortunately, the enemy's hero was my enemy's enemy. Flames were not fatal to the Fireblade clan. Duque's ice circuit had been used up in the huge ice storm, so the only thing left was arcane spells. No longer caring about hiding, the 108 hands of magic formed a huge cloister. One end was the Blade Master leader and the other end was Duque. If he wanted to kill his way to Duque, he had to use the arcane blast from these hands of magic. The dense barrage completely exceeded the limits of what the Blade Master leader could withstand. In less than a tenth of a second, the Blade Master leader was turned into a sieve and fell heavily. Chapter 267. However, the Sword Saint leader was not dead yet. He fell to the ground and blood flowed out from all the wounds on his body. Soon the already red floor was dyed red. He raised his head and opened his remaining eye. He opened his mouth with 3 broken fangs. Human mage, the one you killed is the chieftain of the Fireblade clan, Dar Triple Bloodblade. May I know your name? Dar said in the Beastman language in a deep voice as he coughed up blood. Duke Marcus, the deputy commander of the Rotterdam Alliance. Duque replied in the human language. So it's you. The great chief of the Fireblade clan slowly closed his eyes. Duque fell silent. A few seconds later, the kings Windsor and Gavinrad, who had come back to their senses, let out angry roars with complicated meanings. Oh, was this the joy of surviving a disaster? Was this a roar praising a hero? Or could it be both? No one knew. Anyway, when the guards on the mountainside nervously rushed over with their swords in hand, and the 2 Kirin Tor counselors rushed over with their lives on the line, what they saw was a bloody and unexpected scene. In the sky, the remains of the Beastman Sword Saint that had already been cut into pieces fell to the ground. On the ground, the bodies of the king's guards and attendants lay everywhere. Miraculously, not a single truly important person died in this assassination. Perhaps the kings were like Eden, paralyzed and trembling amidst the bloodstains. Perhaps trembling like Terenas and finding a chair to sit in. Or perhaps they were like Xian and Salas, leaning on their swords and gasping for breath. The guards were in a mess, not knowing what to do. Calm down. The assassins have all been killed by me. The leader was the chieftain of the Fireblade clan, Dar Triple Bloodblade. It was all right now. Don't panic. All the guards formed a defensive formation to protect their king. I'm not sure if there are any assassins left. Pausing for a moment, Duque sat down dejectedly. Krasus, I'll leave this place to you. Inform Lothar that the army will be under his command. Kelp, Thizad, I'll have to trouble you to go back and oversee the mages. After arranging everything, Windsor hurried over to support the limp Duque. Master, are you all right? I'm fine. I'm just a little exhausted. Those sword saints are not easy to deal with. Are you hurt? Gavinrad's face was burning. Just now he couldn't do anything. Under divine protection, he could not use any weapons. He might be able to use the holy light to heal the kings, but the problem was that if the kings were killed instantly, his holy light would be useless. No, it's just that my magic circuits are a bit messed up. I'll be fine after some rest. Duque looked weak on the outside, but he was so happy that he wanted to jump up and shout, Yours truly is rich. Yours truly is rich. Yours truly is rich. There was no reason for it. It was because of the few paragraphs in the system prompt. Congratulations, host. You have extracted a mysterious power from the souls of the sword saints of the Fireblade clan. You have obtained the secret of mirror image. You can now use the advanced version of mirror image. True mirror image. Your temporary special abilities, plunder, and luck, have come into play. You have extracted the true essence of Blade Storm from the soul of Dar Triple Bloodblade. Your Ice Shield and Rapid Avalanche have combined into a new combination skill, Blade Storm. Blade Storm. This is the magical version of the Blade Storm. You can condense the cold aura into countless sharp and frightening blades, slowing down and cutting all enemies within the range of the storm into pieces. The power will increase as your ice circuit is strengthened. However, this is a very extreme magic. As a price, your fully activated ice circuit will be overloaded for a short period of time. You will not be able to use any ice magic for the next 3 days. What is this? This is clearly a killer weapon. Whoosh. I hate that I don't have a high-level ice circuit. Otherwise, the power of this move would be many, many times greater. Thinking of this, Duque felt a little resentful again. The Sun King's arcane fire circuit was indeed amazing, but the problem was that there was no ice magic. Duque rummaged through Mediva's lair for a long time, but he couldn't find an advanced mode for practicing the ice circuit. Involuntarily, Duque thought of Frost Grandpa Antonidas. Antonidas was proficient in all three elements, but he preferred to use water and ice magic. Just by looking at his insane number of water elemental summoning spells, one could tell how powerful his ice circuit was. But it doesn't seem to be easy. Duque's mind was a little messy. When he came back to his senses, the entire South Shore, the entire Hillsbrad Hills were boiling. We won. Long live Anduin Lothar. Long live Duke Marcus. The huge sound waves formed wave after wave of angry waves, wantonly attacking everyone's eardrums. From the northernmost refugee camp, to the gathering place of the reserve troops, to the vicinity of the headquarters, to the two hills that had just experienced a bloody battle, to the beach, and even to the battleship that was on the sea, everyone raised their fists or weapons high in the air. Long spears were like a forest and swords were like the sea. Thousands of wills converged into one sentence. Long live the Alliance. Whose tears were flying. Who was venting their sorrow. The orcs, who had thought that they were invincible, were finally beaten into the hell of losers under the united efforts of the 7 major human kingdoms. Their corpses were thousands of miles away. Those ugly and ferocious faces were stiff because they had lost their lives. Those huge and frightening bodies covered the entire ground of South Shore, the entire beach and half of the sea. The terrifying legend of the orcs' invincibility was shattered today, right here and now. Long live. The cheers of thousands of soldiers and civilians were like a tsunami, soaring into the sky. Long live. The loud cheers seemed to have brought the entire human world back to the past. Under the banner of Thoradin the Great, everyone was united and they were invincible. The 4 human kings walked over, and this time they did not shake hands but hugged. If not for Duque, they would have all died under the blades of the Fireblade clan, and their noble lives would have become the new legend of the Fireblade clan. Unfortunately, it was because there was no if that the alliance could continue. Old Tyrrhenas patted Duque's back and whispered, I owe you one. If Stormwind is unable to restore your kingdom, come to me. I can lend you 100,000 soldiers. Wherever you conquer, that will be your territory. Thank you, Your Majesty Menethil. If that day really comes, I will ask you for this favor. Chapter 268. It had to be said that as the king of the largest human kingdom, Tyrrhenas was quite daring. He was far from the muddle-headed old man of his past life. Previously he said that he would marry Princess Kalia to Duque, but in fact he was just trying to get something out of it. Everyone knew that Princess Kalia had almost no chance of inheriting the throne, because it was passed down through the male line and not the female line. Arthas was definitely the crown prince. The surrounding kingdoms of Lordaeron were all wary of Lordaeron swallowing them, so there was not much chance for their own crown prince to marry Kalia. Kalia's marriage depended on who could bring the most benefits to Lordaeron. Before this, Tyrrhenas and the other nobles of Lordaeron valued Karazhan, which was in Duque's hands. Unfortunately, Duque refused to take the bait, and instead looked like he was obsessed with Aurelia. Now Tyrrhenas decided not to mention Kalia anymore. He directly threw out a more important condition. To be honest, if not for the fact that he knew that Lordaeron was likely to die, Duque might have really agreed. Now it was better to take care of the tribe. If he did not defeat the orcs, all the land and status would be fake. The other 3 kings were naturally not as rich as Tyrrhenas. Of course, Duque had saved their lives, so they naturally knew how to behave. They all said that they would send gifts once they returned to the kingdom. Hee, that's more like it. Otherwise, I swear on my pettiness that if anyone dares to not return the favor, I will immediately make life difficult for your army as the Alliance's deputy commander. Then you can go cry. Duque laughed in his heart. King Salas Trollbane asked the question that everyone wanted to know. Deputy commander, can I call you Duque? Of course, Uncle Salas. Duque smiled. Didn't you just killed? Duque took the initiative to speak. If it was just now, he might not be able to explain how he came back from the dead, and why there was a graveyard next to the command center, and it would only take him a moment to run to the corpse. But now, his mind moved and the arcane circuit changed. In an instant, 3 identical Duques appeared in front of the 4 kings. It was not as simple as looking exactly the same. They were surprised to find that the three duques were doing different things. One was pointing at the map, one was whistling, and one was taking a sip of the hot black tea that the waiter served. Reginald, give me your sword. Windsor had a general idea of what the dukes were up to. He drew his sword and handed it to the duke who had spoken. In the next second, that duque slashed the other two duques with his sword. Not only was blood splattered all over the ground, but there was also a shrill scream. King Eden was so frightened that he became paralyzed again. Then, with a blur, the two duques turned into streams of light and disappeared. Duque chuckled. Sorry for scaring everyone. This is the advanced version of the magician's mirror image. I call it true mirror image. Oh, I see. Everyone applauded Duque's high level of magic. And so, just like that, Duque managed to fool them. There was no need for Duque to clean up the battlefield. As the commander-in-chief of the entire battle, Duque had done a lot. When he returned to his house to rest, every soldier and general along the way, regardless of nationality, respected Duque. To be honest, Duque had put in a lot of effort to trick the tribe. Now, Duque just wanted to go back to his house and have a good sleep. At this time, Duque suddenly noticed that in the status bar for Aurelia, there was the word lightly injured. Demon Queen Aurelia is injured? Duque's heart ached for no reason. Even if Aurelia and Queen Sylvanas couldn't take down Lord Howl, they shouldn't be too far off. Maybe it was because of the terrain. Duque blamed himself a little. Realizing that Duque had changed his direction, Gavin Rad was stunned. Sir, where are you going? I'm going to the elves' encampment. When Duke arrived at the place, he saw the elves lying on the ground in a disorderly manner. The elven archers were all tired after the continuous battle. In less than 2 seconds, the elusive Sylvanas appeared. She tilted her head, blinked, and suddenly sighed. Sorry, I was careless this time. But next time I'll definitely return the favor, sister. After saying that, he disappeared on his own. Queen Sylvanas is indeed a little capricious. Duque sighed inwardly. When Duque walked further inside, he ran into Archbishop Benedict of Stormwind City. Your Grace, Benedict smiled kindly. It's no big deal, but that kind of strain is not the domain of the Holy Light. Perhaps Ms. Windrunner needs to rest for a while. The Archbishop left, and then Gavin Rad whistled. Sir, I understand. I'll wait here. Deep down, Gavin Rad was still a young man of noble birth. Perhaps because of this, his faith wasn't pious enough. As a holy knight, he was always overshadowed by the 4 powerful people chosen by Fao. Duque didn't argue. After all, it was true that he liked Aurelia. Taking a deep breath, Duque walked to the deepest part of the forest. He thought that Aurelia would build a treehouse or something, but all Duque saw was a fishnet-shaped hammock. Aurelia was lying on it, her right hand covering her eyes as she swayed. Sorry, little Duque. I made a fool of myself. I thought I could take care of the opponent cleanly. In the end, the two of us together could only hold him back. You sisters did a good job. He's Grom Hellscream. If given enough time as one of the strongest people in the tribe, he could destroy 3 fleets of Kurdilas. Although I want to say that I feel better, a failure is a failure. It's ugly. You're hurt, Duque said lightly. I'm fine. Then why don't you jump on the ground with your legs? Duque teased. Little guy, are you looking for a beating? Aurelia was a little angry. There's no outsider here. You don't have to hide your injury. When did you become one of us? Aurelia's face suddenly turned red. Just because you went to jail for me? Duque ignored her and went up to Aurelia and reached for her leg. Wait, what are you doing? She pulled out her longbow at lightning speed and blocked in front of Duque's hand. I know a lot about muscle and bone bruises. If you let me handle it, I can let you recover in a week. Or do you want to limp for 3 months? Aurelia thought about it. He wanted to be a cripple for 3 months? Damn it, she was a windrunner. He might as well just kill her and be done with it. Aurelia finally nodded. Okay. But don't lie to me. Chapter 269. Aurelia didn't want to believe Miracle Doctor Do at all. When she was fighting with Grom, she could endure the pain with her willpower. But after the battle, she found that she was in terrible pain. What was worse was that she had forgotten how long it had been since she returned empty-handed. After fighting for so long, there wasn't a single decent prey. Those orcs killed on the beach were no different from rabbits on an outing to her. It was rare to see a decent one, but she couldn't take it down. As the heroine of the Troll War and the eldest sister of the Windrunner family, Aurelia couldn't bear to see her fourth brother silently kill 3 figures. Hearing that the internal tribes wouldn't attack South Shore in the short term, Aurelia was prepared to go to Solder Bridge to kill. But the pain in her leg made her realize that if she went with her injury, she would probably kneel if she met someone as ruthless as Grom Hellscream. Unfortunately, the traditional healing skills of the High Elves and the holy light of humans couldn't do anything to her injury. As a last resort, she could only let Miracle Dr. Do try. Aurelia had already made up her mind. If Miracle Dr. Do was actually Quack Dr. Do, then she wouldn't care if he was the deputy chief of the Alliance or the Hand of God of South Shore. She would make his face feel the same pain as hers. For the time being, it seemed that Miracle Dr. Do was very professional. Without moving closer, Miracle Dr. Do asked, "Which part of your leg hurts and how does it hurt?" Aurelia jumped down on one leg. Her posture was so light that it was almost impossible to tell that she was injured. But from the slight frown on her face, it could be seen that the Great Demon King was in a bit of pain. Sitting on a shiny rock, the Great Demon King stretched out her right leg and took off her knee-high boots, revealing a smooth and beautiful leg. Aurelia's leg shape was really beautiful. Unlike most High Elves' slender legs, her legs were slightly rounder than her brethren's. Perhaps in the eyes of many male compatriots, Servana's slender and straight legs were the pinnacle of orgasm. But as an old racer who had watched 10 terabytes of racing movies, Miracle Dr. Do thought that these legs were the best. This was what attracted Duque the most. Duque didn't pounce on her. Idiot. If he really did that, he would be instantly killed. Duque had no doubt about this. A minute later, Queen Shi, who was wandering outside the forest, suddenly pricked up her ears. She heard some bad noises. She wasn't sure at first, but her sister did a good job of disrupting the flow of the wind. In just a few seconds, the flow of the wind became chaotic. It was obvious that her elder sister had lost control of the wind. This was an extremely rare occurrence which only proved one thing. Elder sister Aurelia had encountered something that made her confused. Not good. That bastard. Queen Sylvie's figure instantly disappeared on the spot. The closer they got to the small forest, the clearer the sound of the wind became. Oh no. Ouch. It hurts. Hey, you bastard. You lied to me. Queen Sylvie could recognize Aurelia's voice even if she turned into ashes. No, only the first one was especially painful. I'll be ready in a minute. This was obviously the little bastard's voice. His soothing voice was full of bewitchment. Really? Really? Oh, bastard, it still hurts, stop. I'm going to kill you. I'm really going to kill you. Can't you be gentle? I'll slow down. It's much better now. I knew it. Servanas couldn't bear it anymore. She instantly passed the paladin who was guarding outside the small forest and rushed in like lightning. The short sword at her waist popped into her hand, revealing a fierce edge. You bastard. What did you do to my sister? Servanas regretted it a little as soon as she finished drinking. What came into view was a rather awkward scene. Aurelia was blushing and lying on a round stone, while Duque was holding Aurelia's right foot and his right hand was pressing on her forefoot. Although their thighs were in a split position, it was a little very ambiguous. At least their clothes were intact. Looking at Queen Servana's sword, Duque was dumbfounded. Aurelia reacted quickly and pointed at her calf. Sister, look, the bulge here is gone. Duque is actually... Now it was Servanas's turn to blush. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. The next moment her whole body turned into a green stream of light and instantly disappeared. Demon Queen Aurelia glared at Duque. Put down my foot. The treatment isn't over yet. If you let go now, your tendons will shrink back. Aurelia blushed and gritted her teeth. Hurry up. Yes. Back to 3 minutes ago, Duque asked Aurelia where it hurt. My knee in here. Aurelia pointed at her calf where there was an obvious bulge. Duque was embarrassed. Sister, you haven't tried it for so long. Cramps? Cramps? What is cramps? Demon Queen Aurelia, who had never been defeated in thousands of years, was as cute as a little girl at the moment. You've never tried it when you're exhausted and very tired and then accidentally, the tendons here contracted violently and curled up into a ball. I've never tried it. I can kill hundreds of trolls without taking a breather. Duque was speechless. Then, Duque gently touched the demon queen's knee and asked her what she did when she got hurt. Duque was confident. Cruciate ligament strain and cramps. The rarest thing is that you didn't pull your tendons back after having cramps for so long. Cruciate ligament strain. Before Duque traveled to this world, many soccer players suffered from this kind of injury. It was either because the frequency of the leg movement was too high, and the ligaments could not bear the load, or because they were too tired, causing the two cruciate ligaments in the knee to strain. Of course, there was a more serious injury in the same position called cruciate ligament tear. That would require surgery. As a member of the High Elf Ranger family, the Windrunner family was really gifted in terms of physical fitness. Perhaps if she hadn't met an opponent like Master Roar, Aurelia would never have hurt her knee. In fact, after the Holy Light treatment, the strain had basically recovered. The Holy Light itself would promote the healing of the wound. After Duque used the system elf to scan it carefully and make sure that it was fine, he helped Aurelia stretch her tendons. A normal human's tendons were a little short. A 90-degree spread of the leg and a forward roll of the foot was enough. The problem was that the Demon Queen's tendons were quite soft and long. It took a full 150 degrees to pull the sore spot. As a result, he had just forced the Demon Queen to stretch her tendons when Queen Sylvie arrived with her sword. Duque was dumbfounded. Chapter 270. Little bastard. You made my sister misunderstand so much. I'm going to kill you. I'm definitely going to kill you. Aurelia flew into a rage out of humiliation. Her hydral breast heaved up and down. The blind Duque did not even dare to look at her. Angry women were the most unreasonable. Trying to reason with her was stupid. Duque activated his ultimate skill, universal attention diversion technique. Does your calf still hurt? Dr. Du's right hand was still holding onto Aurelia's forefoot. His left hand moved along the tendons of her calf. A numb feeling came from her calf. It was like an electric current, striking Aurelia's mind in waves. That strange feeling made the Great Demon King quiver. It doesn't seem to hurt much anymore, the Great Demon King answered truthfully. That's good. Dr. Du put down Aurelia's leg with a serious face. Then he took out a few cow tendons from his storage bag. In front of Aurelia, he cut them into thin strands and made them into something similar to a knee pad. He stuck it on Aurelia's knee. Then Duque used ice magic to create ice particles. He put them into an oiled paper bag and placed them on Aurelia's knee. Hiss, so cold. This is called ice compress. Every morning, noon, afternoon, evening, and before bed, apply ice particles 5 times a day. It will speed up the healing of your knee injury, Dr. Du said seriously. Ice compress had a good effect on knee injuries and knee ligament injuries. Don't ask Duque how he knew. Before he transmigrated, there was an animal in Duque's dormitory who was on the football team. That guy died heroically. Then Duque understood. Are these measures really useful? Aurelia hesitated. Dr. Du revealed a sincere smile. Persist for 3 days. If there's no effect, you're welcome to use a knife to chop me. After Dr. Du finished his treatment, he left in a carefree manner. Aurelia sat on the big rock in a daze for a long time before she suddenly came to her senses. Hey, I seem to be angry just now. What was I angry about? When the ice melted and the numbness passed, she moved her legs and found that the pain in her knees had lessened a lot. Windrunner specialized in agility. Unlike those orc warriors who were used to taking hits head-on and shouting scars are the orcs' medals, they were very clear and sensitive to every change in their bodies. Even if she didn't want to admit it, Aurelia had to admit that her injuries had indeed lightened a lot. Then in the afternoon a problem arose. It was November. Even though it was already autumn, where could she find ice? There were no mages to make ice. The only place with ice was the Atlank Mountains over 100 kilometers away. Was she supposed to abandon her team and run to Alterac to recuperate? Or did she make her sister run errands 5 times a day? There were many mages among the High Elves, but this was the Windrunner's ranger team. Where could she find a mage? She wasn't familiar with any human mages. In the end, when Aurelia was about to bite the bullet and look for Duque's personal maid Vanessa came. As if she had calculated the distance, the ice did not melt when Vanessa arrived. Vanessa Van Cleve did not give Aurelia a good look. Our master is very busy. For the sake of your injury, I suggest you live closer to him. For some reason Vanessa had a slight hostility towards Aurelia. Aurelia would not really argue with a minor, so she silently accepted the ice. Duque was really busy. The so-called alliance was just a grassroots team at the moment. Although Lothar seemed to follow Lang and was highly educated, his internal affairs were actually zero. Even though Terina's was a good person and lent Duque 15 internal affairs officers, in fact, all the logistics were still gathered to Duque and decided by the deputy chief commander, Duque. Lothar? Even if Lothar had to be a human stamping machine, Duque would not let Lothar have it easy. Good brothers, even if they fart under the blanket, they will die together. How can I be the only one busy? Hehe. So Lothar was in a difficult situation. Apart from stamping, he was also sent by Duque to various legions to visit the wounded and the families of the dead. The victory in South Shore this time definitely disrupted the orcs' pace of attack. For a long time, there was no report of the orc laborers building new ships in large quantities. Both the Alliance and the Horde knew that it was impossible to maintain the offensive in the coming winter. This was the last battle before winter. If the Horde successfully landed on the Hillsbrad Hills, then the Alliance would not have a good time this winter. This was because the Dalagen, Gilness, Alterac and Torrentberg would all be under the threat of the orcs' attack. On the contrary, the Alliance won a great victory and could at least have a more stable winter. The statistics from this battle were: in the naval battle, more than 1,500 small and medium-sized transport ships were destroyed, and 80 large transport ships with 1,000 people were destroyed. A conservative estimate was about 100,000 Horde people died, but the composition was unknown. In the beach battle, the Horde lost 67,000 laborers and 59,000 official soldiers. Among them, the Warsong tribe lost more than 15,000 people. However, most of the strongest Warsong tribe's main force retreated through the eastern beach. 200,000 Horde people, even the worthless laborers, probably accounted for more than 60% of them. This was a shocking victory no matter how one looked at it. Comparatively, the human side suffered very few losses. The heaviest casualties were on the western coast, where the Horde mainly attacked. The Lordaeron people paid a heavy price for this, which was 15,000 deaths. The eastern hill of the Stormwind Kingdom was much better, but 7,000 people had died in battle. Together with other battle losses, the Alliance lost more than 31,000 people, and nearly 20,000 wounded soldiers were permanently out of the battle line. What was more disgusting was that the orcs were a bunch of poor bastards and there were no spoils of war to speak of. They really did not get any tangible benefits even if they won. When Duque was disposing of the corpses, he ordered them to be pushed into the sea, so that the Murlocs, who had also lost a lot but had no fear of meat, could have a good meal. This might have stimulated the Murlocs to have fertility activities. The only good thing was that the Horde's crazy attack proved the orcs' ambition to occupy the whole world. At the same time, the display of more than 10,000 orc heads in each capital gave every kingdom in the Alliance enough capital to declare this a great victory. Winter was coming and the armies in battle were simply black holes that devoured food. Duque sent almost all the troops of the kingdoms back to their own countries. Basically, the entire South Shore defense line was left with the troops of Stormwind City and Mograine's army, plus the Silver Hand and a Lordaeron cavalry regiment. Of course, the elves were an exception. In the autumn wind that was gradually becoming cold, Duque stood against the wind. Looks like we can have a stable winter. Chapter 271. It was an autumn night at the end of November. Lying on a self-made beach chair, Duque looked up at the starry Azeroth sky and was speechless for a long time. This was a starry sky that was completely different from Earth's. As a child in a big city, he had never seen such a beautiful starry sky. He remembered that even at night the stars in the sky were mostly dim. Stars of the 0 class were the brightest, and stars of the 6th class and above were almost invisible to the naked eye. In a city surrounded by exhaust gas and atmospheric pollutants, stars of at least the 3rd class could be seen. The starry sky of Azeroth was clean and clear. Although the constellations written by Earthlings based on Earth's position were completely useless here, the stars shone brightly here and it was beautiful. The stars twinkled. Some starlight went out and some new stars lit up like lights in the mortal world. There was a small balcony on the roof of the wooden house that Duque had ordered people to build for him. There was only enough space for a single bed. This was originally Duque's private space, but unfortunately half of it had been occupied by the great demon king. At first Aurelia only came to get ice for her feet, but later she became more casual. In particular, the iced okra made by Duque with wasabi sauce became one of the great demon king's favorites. A strange and natural taste. This was Aurelia's evaluation of the novel food of the transmigrator. Aurelia looked up at the starry sky. Under the moonlight, her beautiful face seemed to sparkle. The brilliance of the stars and the moon outlined the charming arc of her face, shining on her ivory-white skin, and finally, it seemed that all the starlight gathered into her emerald green eyes. She looked at the starry sky, a little fascinated. "Ah, it seems that it feels good to look at the starry sky from a place other than Cuel Salis," Aurelia exclaimed. Although he wanted to complain that it was not the same starry sky, Duque finally changed his words. "Don't you need to go back in winter?" Aurelia combed her bright blonde hair. "It's been thousands of years. I'm used to the scenery of my hometown. It's not bad to go out for a few years occasionally. Unless the Sun King or the Parliament gives the order to give up the covenant with Thoradin the Great, I'll have to play outside for at least a few years." The elves, who possessed eternal lifespans, were truly indifferent to the concept of time. It was no wonder that they had always kept their distance from short-lived races. However, if the general trend of history did not change, it would not be long before the elves lost their eternal lives. Duque did not dare to guarantee anything. The river of fate had long been shattered by Duque. Due to his interference in fate, if the First Orc War ended with the fall of Stormwind City, it would at least be in line with the historical ending. Now, in this World War II, Duque felt that he had lost most of his prophetic abilities. Even though he had threatened the Bear family that the horde would land from the hinterlands, the Bear family did not believe him. In fact, it was almost impossible to do. This meant that the tribe's transport fleet had to pass through the narrow strait between the northern and southern continents. After all, this strait was over 100 meters high, and under Duke's strong suggestion, King Salas had already ordered the engineers of Fort Riptide to build a new batch of catapults along the cliffs on the north side of the strait. The new militia would be in charge of monitoring the entire strait. As long as the tribe's transport ships dared to pass, Duque was willing to bet that the entire tribe's fleet would sink in the strait, blocking the strait. The scene would be spectacular. It was the same for the coast of the Hillsbrad Hills. Previously, Duque was just bullying the enemy, but not now. Before the last bunch of ripe wheat was harvested in the Hillsbrad Hills, Duque had already mobilized the idle people of Stormwind City to start building forts along the entire coastline. The kingdom will not be able to recover in the next 2 to 3 years. In order to ensure the safety of our temporary residents, please do your best to help. The refugees still had lingering fears from the war less than a week ago. For safety and for the extra food rationed in Duque's work for relief plan, the people sold their labor at a very low price. Under the command of Naga, the Murlocs were building wooden stakes in the shallow waters of the entire coast, greatly reducing the area that could be landed. Moreover, Duque's Murlocs had begun to set up camp in the shallow waters of the western side of Tangarok. After this winter, if the tribe dared to attack again, they would have to face a line of defense that was as hard as a meat grinder. "Hey, which direction will the tribe attack from next?" Aurelia asked Duque. "To be honest, I don't know. In principle, I have already blocked all 3 possible directions of attack." "Oh. Unless the tribe builds their ships from the Swamp of Sorrows in the southwest of the southern continent more than 2,000 nautical miles away, as long as they set off from the wetlands opposite South Shore, they can either attack South Shore, cross the strait and Solder Bridge. The last route is to go west around the cape opposite Gilness, and then north to the North Stream coast or the South Stream coast. These 3 routes must be paved with the blood of the orcs. Why can't they conquer the sea route more than 2,000 nautical miles away?" Aurelia asked. "Because." Duque deliberately kept her in suspense. He took out a piece of okra from the ice bucket, dipped it in soy sauce and wasabi, and was about to put it in his mouth. Who knew that Aurelia would come to snatch the okra? Well, her cherry lips bit down on Duque's hand. Originally, Duque vowed to die rather than submit, but when the great demon king snatched the food, Mount Hygel happened to swing in front of Duque's eyes unconsciously. And then Mr. Okra died in battle. "You have big breasts, you're ruthless." Aurelia, the cute girl, did not seem to realize how lethal her action was to a little boy who was about to lose his Kirin arm. She even raised her nose proudly. Hee hee. Because of what? Because there's a giant whirlpool in the west of the southern continent. Not to mention the orcs' ships, even the ships of Cultivation would have sunk. Duke was a little stunned as he answered. Does that mean that the Horde can't even find a place to land? If the Horde doesn't mind setting off from the Gulf of Paladin in the wetlands and being bled all the way to the South Stream coast, they can still land. But how effective it will be is another matter. Duke had completely lost his foresight on how the Horde would land. In the original history, the Horde landed on a large scale and succeeded in one go. They mobilized Lothar's army in the Hillsbrad Hills. Lothar was forced to fight a field battle with the Horde. The result was a draw. Orgrim led the Horde's army to the hinterlands in the northeast, and then went all the way to the High Elves in the north. Now, it was time to see what Orgrim would do. Chapter 272. Orgrim was annoyed. The failure to cross the sea to attack Southshore was a humiliation in his history as a great chief. Even though everyone knew that this was only one of Orgrim's larger-scale probing attacks, it was impossible for them to win. This was because Zhang Ji's 25,000 warriors were the only ones who had participated in the battle. The rest of the warriors were mostly from the smaller clans. But a failure was a failure. The simple and violent beastmen had no concept of feints. Most of them thought that Stormwind City was taken by the Blackhand Great Chief, and that Orgrim had just returned to pick up an empty city. Iron Furnace Castle, which was supposed to be Orgrim's victory, was not completely conquered. It wasn't that Kilrog Deadeye's Bloodloop clan didn't work hard, but when they reached the gates of Iron Furnace Castle, the Bloodloop clan's warriors were stuck. No beastman could withstand that kind of three-dimensional all-encompassing cannon fodder attack. Many times, a hole suddenly appeared in the mountain wall and fatal shots, guns or even cannons would shoot out from inside. His greatest achievement was pushing through the gates and almost entering the dwarves' core area. Then the warriors that killed their way in were met with the dwarves' steam tanks and various cannons. Those beastman warriors were killed just like that. This had nothing to do with courage, it was purely a matter of battle philosophy. Just now news came that Orgrim had failed again. The scouting fleet that came back from the Swamp of Sorrows was that the fleet that he had painstakingly built was almost completely annihilated, and not a single ship could return. From the shore to the deepest part of the sea, a huge whirlpool that spanned the entire area? Orgrim felt that the beastman's luck had run out, even though he didn't really believe it. In the past he might have been able to recite the blessings of his ancestors. However, after almost all the orc shamans abandoned their traditions and changed from shaman to warlock, he had never heard of any warlock who could still sense the call of Mother Earth. What Orgrim had to face was that winter was coming. Before the end of this winter he might not be able to organize a proper battle across the sea. Wetlands, as the name suggested, was an area formed by a large number of swamps and shallow puddles. Spending the winter here was a nightmare. Beastmen were hardworking, but given a choice, no one would be willing to spend the winter in such a wet and cold place. Not long after Orgrim became the Great Chief, his reputation started to show. He did not have enough confidence to subdue those hot-tempered chiefs. Moreover, the requirements seemed so reasonable. We are willing to fight to the death for our tribe. But at least give us a peaceful winter. No clan would choose to start a war in winter unless it was a disaster that would wipe out the entire clan. We have conquered an entire continent. The warriors of the tribe are very tired, and winter is the season to produce the next generation of warriors. I can't oppose this tradition. What are the orcs doing in the winter? As long as there was enough food, the beastmen would roast themselves over a fire, eat the food that had been stored, and carry the female beastmen to give birth to the little beastmen. This was a tradition that had been passed down for tens of thousands of years. Orgrim reluctantly agreed to withdraw the army to the south, to the more comfortable Loch Moden area. In order to appease his Blackrock tribe, he even moved most of them back to the Elven Forest. Of course, the Blackrock tribe was happy to travel for half a month back to this territory that they had sacrificed more than 100,000 of their kind to conquer. After all, it was warmer there and Duque did not burn all of the forest. There were still many trees that could be used as charcoal to keep them warm during the winter. Orgrim's only consolation was that his new assistant, the chief of the Dragonmaw tribe and shaman Zulu Cid, brought him that news as well as his biggest worry, Ghoul Dan was injured. He went to see Ghoul Dan yesterday. The former ruler of the tribe was not in good condition. Apologies, chief. The humans have a very powerful mage. Even though I heavily injured him, I won't be able to work for the tribe for a long time. As he spoke, Gul Dan's breath was weak, and his shoulder was completely covered in ice. Or rather, half of his body was stuck in a block of ice. Orgrim squinted his eyes. He had seen human ice magic before, but this was the first time he had seen such a terrifying one. An icicle had pierced through Gul Dan's shoulder. With the wound as the center, there was a terrifying cold energy that didn't dissipate. Orgrim roughly used Hammer of Destruction to smash away half of the ice, but it was useless. The ice seemed to be like a slime that could grow infinitely, and in just a few seconds, it returned to its original state. Orgrim furrowed his brows. This is a mysterious energy method of humans called Arcane Circuit. That powerful mage injected a portion of his power into my body, and it formed an independent circuit. Before I destroy this power, my injury will not heal. Orgrim nodded. Rest well. Orgrim left after saying this. He did not even ask Gul Dan to provide more death knights. Who knew that as soon as Orgrim left, Gul Dan would sneer. In front of his confidant, the twin-headed ogre warlock Guggle, the ice on his shoulder shattered with a loud bang. The seemingly extremely cold and powerful icicle was now stuck in Gul Dan's shoulder like a small piece of chopstick. Orgrim, you fool who doesn't know what power is. Very well, go back to your war. I still have other things to do. Because of your relief, I will have more freedom to focus on these things. I will continue to play the role of a loyal warlock who was wounded for the glory of the tribe. But I swear, this will not be forever. Soon I will get what I seek, and then you and the tribe will disappear from my sight forever. I will set up a new force to replace you, a force that is only loyal to me, and then I will transform the world according to my plan. Ha 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 ha. Gul Dan laughed wildly. His laughter greatly encouraged the remaining warlocks of the Shadow Council. After Orgrim left, he went straight to the Dragon's Roar tribe's encampment with his guards. Next to the Patriarch's tent, Orgrim saw a thin and wrinkled old beastman, but there was still a pair of sharp brownish-red eyes under his gray and tattered braid. Zulu hid. Orgrim shouted. The old beastman shaman looked towards the source of the voice and found that it was the great tribal chief calling his name. He immediately stood up and pushed away the wine glass and large plate placed in front of him. Chapter 273. Doomhammer. Unlike Gul Dan's humility, Zulud didn't bow and Orgrim didn't mind either. After all, Zulud was a tribal chief, the leader of the Dragonmaw tribe. He was also a shaman, the only shaman who accompanied his tribe after coming to this world. Furthermore, Orgrim felt more comfortable talking to a typical beastman like him. It was because of the shaman's strange prophecy, or rather, the things he could provide that Orgrim was very interested in. How's that going? Doomhammer didn't bother with pleasantries and directly took the wine cup Zulud handed over. The wine inside was very good, and the human blood that flowed into the cup made it even more delicious. It's done. Great chief. Zulud opened his smelly mouth and let out a smile that seemed like a declaration of victory. Take me to see it. No. Immediately. Orgrim couldn't wait any longer. Of the two attacks, one was a complete defeat and the other was a complete failure. Orgrim deeply felt the bottleneck of the beastmen. As the most knowledgeable beastman and also the one with the highest position, Orgrim knew that the era of the beastmen conquering the world was over. Understood. Please follow me. Zulud called for Orgrim to mount his warg. Not long after, they arrived at the southeast side of the wetlands. This place was called Grimbater, as the dwarves called it. It used to be a dwarven stronghold, but now it belonged to the Dragonmaw tribe. While the rooms in the dwarven stronghold were large enough for the dwarves, it wasn't friendly to most of the beastmen. Zulud had most of his tribesmen who had nothing better to do expand this place. The stronghold was well equipped, and it was built inside the mountains, making it easy to defend. This was very important because there was a killing machine here that could break through the damned defenses of the humans. Zulud brought the great chief and his guards deeper into the stronghold, and finally arrived in front of a large iron gate. One could imagine that behind the gate was a vast underground hall. What's inside? You told me a few weeks ago that you sensed an incomparably powerful mysterious force that could change the entire situation. Is this thing inside now? Yes, my great chieftain. I hope the thing inside has that value. Do you know? Zuluhid, for the sake of that illusory image of yours, I sent you 30,000 elite orcs as a search team and 100,000 laborers as excavators. If it weren't for you, I would have gone all out to attack South Shore. Now, if you disappoint me, I don't mind showing you the wrath of the great chief. Orgrim raised the hammer of destruction in his hand and made a threatening declaration. You won't be disappointed, great chief. Zuluhid wrinkled his nose and revealed a rough smile. At this moment, one of Orgrim's guards tried to touch the handle of the gate. Wait. The Dragon Maw tribe's chief issued a stern warning. He took out a strange thing from a large bag on his waist. It was a huge and ordinary-looking golden disc. He raised the disc high up in the air. I am the master of Demon's Soul, and I order you to appear in the name of my master. Guardian. It was hard to tell if Zuluhid was using the shaman's power or not. In any case, in the eyes of the great tribal chief and the dozens of orc guards, they could only see countless sparks surging from the huge iron gate, gathering into a figure in the void in front of the iron gate. The figure gradually became clearer. It was a tall and strong humanoid figure wearing unfamiliar bone armor. Its top looked like a demon's skull that had lost its skin and flesh, but it was burning with flames. Its eyes were balls of black flames. This strange existence floated in front of them. It was as tall as the orcs, but it looked sluggish. It emitted an indescribable power and a sense of vigilance. We want to go in, Zulud said as he raised the demon's soul in front of him and pointed at Orgrim and his guards. He was telling it that we included those creatures. The strange existence nodded, turned into countless sparks again, and disappeared in front of the gate. The Dragon Maw tribe's chief nodded to his great chief, indicating that they could enter. What will happen if we barge in? Orgrim asked. Very bad. That time a messenger came with your message. He didn't wait for me to remove the guard before rushing in. Then that guard appeared out of nowhere and grabbed that idiot's head with its huge, burning hand. Then that idiot's head turned to ash. Orgrim could almost imagine a huge flaming claw grabbing the careless beastman's head, flames coming out of his orifices. A few seconds later, the beastman stopped screaming, and his body went limp as his head turned into a pile of ash. Fortunately, Zuluhid was a pure orc, and not a schemer like Ghoul Dan, who made Orgrim uncomfortable all day long. Fortunately, Ghoul Dan was heavily injured. The huge iron gate opened with a squeak. Inside, there were dozens of heavy metal chains that had been heated red by the high temperature and were attached to the wall. Oddly enough, Orgrim thought that he would see a gigantic creature cramming the entire cave. In the end, at the end of the magical chain that got thinner and thinner as it got closer to the center of the room, was a human female. From the point of view of the entrance, her face was pressed against the ground, and she was lying on her side with her head facing the innermost part of the cave. She was wearing a crimson-red gauntlet and leggings with golden edges, and a sexy bikini battle armor. As a woman, she was very beautiful. She had a head of fiery red hair and a body that was incomparably seductive in the eyes of humans. He didn't know if it was because of comfort or despair, but Orgrim could clearly feel that she was actually awake, but she was lying there just like that. Orgrim was enraged. He pointed at the plump breasts and slender waist with his thick finger and cursed at Zuluhid. You idiot, you're attracted by these shriveled breasts and slender waist. Bastard. I don't care which human queen or princess she is. Zuluhid, you're dead. At this moment, Zuluhid smiled mysteriously and knocked on the disc in his hand. In the next moment, the seemingly human woman and the chain rapidly grew in size together. A few seconds later, Orgrim recovered from his shock. Haha. Well done, Zuluhid. Chapter 274. The threat of the Horde had not disappeared. The Alliance and the Horde were like two giant beasts fighting to the death. They had to stop fighting in the face of the weather and lick their wounds. The refugees from the Stormwind Kingdom who were stranded in the Hillsbrad Hills received a batch of crucial summer food, but it was not enough, so Duke went to the Berev family for this. Duke did not see Duke Berev. The Duke had gone to Altrak. Unexpectedly, Janice, who met Duke on behalf of the Duke, agreed to Duke's request to buy rations. No problem. The people of Stormwind have made outstanding contributions to the resistance against the Horde. It is only right for the bear family to do something for them. How about 10,000 tons of wheat this year? According to the previous price. This time it was Duque's turn to be surprised. 5,000 tons back then was a 30% premium. According to the previous price, it sounded like the bear family was still a scam. But this was not the time. The battle in South Shore made the entire northern continent realize that the threat of the orcs was close at hand. Those terrifying green-skinned beasts wanted to slaughter all the humans in the world. As a result, the price of everything related to the people's lives soared. Even if the Alliance used a great victory to prove that they had the ability to defeat the Horde invasion. The various kingdoms also introduced a lot of policies to suppress the skyrocketing prices, but the most important thing was that the price of grain still increased by more than 2.5 times. Selling at the previous price wasn't a scam, it was a huge sale. Duque was moved. This really. I thank you on behalf of the people of Stormwind. No need to thank me. Helping the people of Stormwind is helping the Alliance and Alterac. The Duchess smiled kindly. Yes, I heard that your private army's equipment isn't enough. Is there anything the Bear family can help with? In a state of war, the price of weapons, food, soldiers and everything related to war soared. Duque's luxury goods business had long been stagnant. If it wasn't for the fact that he had gathered enough weapons and equipment before the war, Duque's so-called private army would have to be equipped with a bamboo spear, of course. Everyone lacked weapons, especially after losing their own country. Even if Duque opened a blacksmith shop in the refugee camp north of South Shore, workers and raw materials were still scarce. Obviously, the Bear family did not lack these things. I'll be honest with you. Whether it's Stormwind or my private army, they all need it. May I ask, what do I have to pay for this? Mrs. Janice, Duke asked politely. As a testament to the friendship between the Bear family and the Marcus family, these small gifts are not worth mentioning. If I must say what I personally wish for, could I ask you, Duque, to teach my daughter the secret of multicast? Duque was stunned, then he smiled. The best way to deepen the relationship between nobles was through marriage. Mrs. Janice was very clever. If it was the Duque of the past, a duke and a duke's daughter would definitely be a good match. Now, Duque was the rising star of the Rotterdam Alliance, the Alliance's deputy commander, and he had saved 5 kings and won the Battle of South Shore. Duque was almost synonymous with miracles. Princess Kalia of Rotterdam and many other princesses were almost at Duque's disposal. If he proposed a marriage, it would only be humiliating for the Bear family. On the other hand, the Bear family urgently needed a backup. Alterac was too weak. Even if they entered a state of war, the entire Alterac family only had a little more than 30,000 soldiers, including 20,000 farmers. These farmers who had just washed their feet and started working in the fields were completely useless in terms of morale and training. Putting aside the ambitious Rotterdam kingdom, the wandering Stormwind kingdom was an ideal partner to work with. Perhaps the refugees of Stormwind would stay near South Shore for a long time, but as long as the 7 human kingdoms still existed, and as long as the Alliance existed, Stormwind would definitely not dare to take the risk of being criticized by the world and covet Alterac's land. In a roundabout way to save the country, the Bear family proposed to let Wuxia become Duque's disciple. In Azeroth, although there was no saying that a teacher for a day was a father for life, the relationship between a teacher and a student was still very important. If it wasn't for national righteousness or the rise and fall of a country, it would be shameful for the entire human kingdom to betray and kill one's teacher. Even if it was in the name of righteousness, it was not something to be proud of. This was also why in the original history, Khadgar was criticized by many for killing Medivh for the sake of the world. Duque thought for a while. I now have the responsibility of the Alliance's deputy commander. I may not have much time to teach Miss Wuxia. At this point, Duchess Janice was so nervous that her heart almost jumped out of her throat. This was how relationships were. If one did not advance, they would fall back. It was very difficult to maintain a stalemate. Moreover, Stormwind had already gained a foothold. The Bear family, which was weaker in terms of military strength, needed help from Duque and Stormwind in order to deal with the threat of the orcs. Things were different now. The current Duque and Stormwind could completely ignore Alterac and the Bear family. Not befriending the Bear family would do Duque no good, nor would it do him any harm. If he considered the destruction of the Bear family in the future, Duque really did not need to save this family. At this moment, the faces of the undead Janus and Lucia from Scholomance that appeared in Duque's mind overlapped with the Janus in front of him. For some reason he suddenly sympathized with the bear family. He had fought for so long just so that he would not become a ghoul. It was as if Duque could see the Lucia bear of the future, standing among a group of necromancers. Even though her family was not far away, she could only wait for the Lich King to summon her to the holy land of the undead scourge. Mrs. Janus dissected the corpses one after another. At that time she was no longer the elegant and beautiful mistress of the bear family. In her crazy eyes, those soulless zombies were her only friends. Since the start of the First War, too many kingdoms and families had been destroyed by the 3 consecutive wars. Duque was not a savior. He could not save everyone. However, since this tragedy was happening right in front of his eyes, he might as well save them. Thinking of this, Duque changed the topic. However, if the bear family does not mind, I am willing to discuss the mysteries of magic with Miss Lucia. At this moment Janus finally let out a sigh of relief. Chapter 275. For Duque it was just a convenience, but for the bear family, it had a completely different meaning. As if seeing through what Duque wanted the most after confirming their close alliance, Lady Janus threw out her ultimate trump card. It's Lucia's honor to study the mysteries of magic with you, Duque. I'll write a letter now. Please pass it to Lucia when you go to the Dalajan. Duque was curious. Madam, you know that I'm going to the Dalajan? Lady Janus showed a proud expression. I heard that you used ice spells to kill more than a dozen powerful orc assassins in the command center and saved 4 kings. Duque tilted his head. That's right. I only know that if it was my senior brother Antonidas, even when he was still a sky mage, he would not have let the last assassin break through his ice domain. Even if he was the chief of a tribe. Why do you say that? Although he had guessed Janus's intentions, Duque still asked. Because at that time he had a top-level ice circuit model more than you did. Lady Janus smiled like a flower, and her posture as she took a sip of black tea was extremely elegant. Duque seemed to see an equally elegant foxtail wagging behind her. This was where Janus was smart. From the perspective of forming an alliance or deepening friendship, the conditions she gave Duque before could not be considered generous or costly. She and the bear family certainly hoped to have Duque as external aid, but at this time, it seemed that the bear family did not necessarily need Duque's support. To some extent this was also a test. If Duque refused, then naturally the top-level ice circuit model would not have anything to do with Duque. If Duque agreed like this, it would be a pleasant surprise. Janus did not add this bargaining chip when she made the request, because she did not want this to become a pure transaction. In exchange for the bear family's gift, he wouldn't help the bear family at a critical moment. After figuring this out, Duque didn't have any ill feelings towards Janus. This kind of, if you respect me I'll respect you tenfold method. Duque didn't hate it. Moreover, Lady Janus was smart enough to figure out what he wanted. She was indeed quite intelligent. I told senior brother Antonidas long ago that I wanted him to pass that ice circuit to Lucia. As half of Lucia's master, I think you, Duque, should help Lucia with her research. Janus summoned her servant and wrote a letter in her own handwriting, handing it to Duque. Thank you so much, madam. Just like that, Duque brought Janus's handwritten letter to the Dalajan. It was different from the last time he came in the middle of the night. This time, although Duque took advantage of this rare free time to pay a visit of a more personal nature, Duque's status was completely different now. Previously, Duque's magic had not been proven to the 5 northern countries. Now Duque was a big shot who had truly secured the position of the deputy commander of the alliance. Therefore, the person who led the team to receive Duque was Prince Kale. That's one of the 6-member council members who remained in the Dalajan. Welcome, Commander Marcus. At this time Kale, that was still the role model of the High Elf. He was gentle and elegant, and he gave off a feeling of a spring breeze to anyone he met. Moreover, he deliberately hid the word deputy to make him appear more mature. Everyone liked to be flattered. Kale, that's name which seemed to have slipped out, was actually a slightly exaggerated compliment. Hee, when you say that I almost think that Commander Lothar is here, Duque replied without a trace. There's no need to be humble. Everyone knows your contributions to the alliance. Seeing that Duque was not snubbed, Kale, that did not deliberately sow discord between Duque and Lothar. He changed the topic and said, "Actually, many mages in the Dalajan are fascinated by your spellcasting skills. If you have time to come to the Dalajan to teach or hold seminars, I'm sure many mages will join the Royal Mages in Stormwind because of your reputation. It's not good for me to poach mages in the Dalajan like this, right?" Duque was slightly tempted. In the Dalajan, all mages are equal and free. Mystics pay attention to fair trade. In order to explore a more profound world of magic, so what if I give up a moment of freedom? Just as everyone can freely choose whether to join the Dalajan's direct mages, the Dalajan will not mind free mages joining Stormwind or becoming your followers, Your Excellency. How about it? Do you want to consider it? If Kale, that's flattery at the beginning, had gone too far, then this time Kale, that's proposal could be said to be a tailor-made and wonderful proposal. It immediately touched Duque's heart. Ducting mages for free. He did not need to cultivate them himself. He could just take away a semi-finished product and train them himself for a year and a half. When the time came, even if they were not flashy enough, they could still be scary. Duque was really tempted. This time, Duque was sincerely grateful to Kale. Sorry Kale, thank you very much. I think I'll find some time. Before that, I want to see Antonidas first. Please follow me. Kale, that's finally confirmed that he had redeemed the little bit of unhappiness at the beginning and had successfully gained Duque's favor. It was reasonable to say that as the Prince of the High Elves, Kale, could completely ignore Duque on the surface. But one should not forget why Kale, had come to the Dalajan to study and then stayed for so many years. He could not return to Kuel Salis even though he was about to go moldy. The story behind this was the power struggle between his father, the Sun King, and the Silvermoon Council. Having seen the customs of the two worlds, Kale, had long become extremely mature. In particular, there was no harm in having a good relationship with Duque, the powerful deputy commander of the Alliance. Moreover, he and Duque also had a strange sense of closeness. It was a kind of closeness that seemed to come from the same source. Walking on the streets of the Dalajan, Duque felt very strange. This was a Dalajan that had not been destroyed. Although it was not as wonderful as the Dalajan that floated in the air in the future and was known as the City in the Sky. Now this Dalajan was even bigger and more historical. This wonderful city located south of Lake Lordamere was a combination of wisdom, power, grandeur, beauty, art, and mystery. It was the brightest pearl of the entire continent and even the entire world. Once, almost all the human mages in the world studied the magic they learned from the High Elves here. And the mysterious and elegant white towers all over the city showed the wisdom, ambition, status, and power of the mages. If Duque had not inherited Karazhan, perhaps Duque would have considered building a mage tower here. As Kale, led the way, he introduced everything here to Duque. At this moment, a very beautiful blonde girl came in front of Duque. "Hello, Your Excellency Sky Mage Duke Marcus. I am Jaina Proudmoore." Chapter 276. In the world of Azeroth, there were two heroines that no one could avoid. The Alliance's Jaina. The Horde's Sylvanas. In the world's crisis after crisis, the two of them may not have played the most important role, but in every event they were indispensable. Duque had mixed feelings about Jaina. Perhaps in the future, Jaina would still walk on the path that seemed to be destined to be difficult. She would watch her rumored boyfriends die one by one, watch the entire northern continent be destroyed by the Scourge army and forced to move west to the Kalimdor continent. In order to deal with a greater threat to ensure peace with the Horde, she would be forced to commit patricide. She would continue to go astray in every attack. In the end, Theramore, which she had managed for half her life, was flattened by an Azeroth nuclear bomb. Everyone who trusted and supported her was killed, and her hair turned white overnight. She became the evil Jaina who did everything for the Black Horde and didn't care about the current situation. If that was the case, Jaina would undoubtedly have a serious conflict with Duque, who was a supremacist of the Alliance. But at this moment, Jaina was still a 12-year-old lowly. She had a delicate face that seemed to be carved by God. She had a small chin, clear blue eyes, soft blonde hair that just passed her shoulders, and a curvaceous body that had yet to fully develop. She was a classic beauty that was off the charts. 12 years old. Before Duque's transmigration, this was the age where he would have to be punished. Perhaps she already had a lot of thoughts of love and peace in her heart, but it was only at the level of a young girl's fantasy. Perhaps she would still become the Holy Mother in the future, but at this moment she was still a 12-year-old girl. Loli had three good things. No. Actually, with Duque's current status in the Jianghu, he was not inferior to Jaina at all. In other words, if Duque wanted to, he could totally adopt Jaina, change her name to Ailey, and teach her what it meant to be an Onababa. Cough cough. You must be joking. Duque was not such a person. He had always believed in his own integrity. Look, if necessary, he could loudly declare 3 times without hesitation. I'm not a lolicon. I'm not a lolicon. I'm a lolicon. There seems to be something wrong with the third time. Forget it, in life there are as many troubles as the stars in the sky, don't mind these small details. Kale, that could not help but smile when he saw that Duque was stunned after seeing Jaina. He suddenly remembered that the all-powerful deputy commander of the Alliance who had killed more than 200,000 orcs twice was actually just a 15-year-old boy. Miss Jaina is indeed the masterpiece of the gods. She is one of the 2 most beautiful girls in Dalaran. Jaina's face immediately turned red when she heard Kale, that's who was handsome and didn't show any signs of being corrupted at all. Kale's that is. Kale was. Looking at her beautiful face, Duke suddenly understood why Arthas and Kale, that's were infatuated with Jaina. Duke smiled and nodded slightly. Praise your beauty, Miss Proudmoore. Although I would like to use magic to show my respect to you, this is Dalajan. I'd better not embarrass myself in front of everyone. Jaina was a little disappointed after hearing Duque's words. Everyone knew about Duque's impressive achievements, but Duque was not famous for his status and achievements. Instead, he was famous for his gorgeous magic tricks to please beautiful women. In Lordaeron, Duke used a beautiful rose of ice and fire to praise Princess Kalia Menethil of Lordaeron. In South Shore, Duque had used an illusory ice crystal rainbow divine song Ode to Joy to promote Aurelia Windrunner's beauty to the point that almost everyone in the Alliance knew. Men worshipped Hero's invincible and unparalleled achievements. Women, on the other hand, loved Hero's gorgeous tricks. Duque did not know that there was a widely acknowledged saying among the upper-class ladies. Only those who had been praised by Duque with the most dazzling magic were truly stunning beauties. Firstly, she was quite confident in her beauty. Secondly, Jaina wanted to see what kind of hero this man, who had been repeatedly recruited by her father and almost became Kratira's horse, was. Now that Duque had refused to help, Jaina's disappointment could be imagined. Unexpectedly, Kaizi started to make a fuss. Duque, that's not very kind of you, is it? I also know that Her Highness Kalia and Lady Aurelia are rare beauties in the world. Could it be that our Dalajan Princess Jaina is not as beautiful as them? Kale, that's put his hands on his hips, looking as if he was going to stand up for his Dalajan. This made it difficult for Duque to step down. Duque smiled bitterly. In the ordinary areas of the Dalajan, isn't it not allowed to cast spells casually? Kale, that's gently stroked his shoulder. I guarantee it with my identity. Damn it, I almost forgot that Kaizi is a member of the Kirin Tor 6-member council. Jaina did not speak, but she stared at Duque with her starry eyes full of anticipation. This was like chasing an old sow up a tree and then playing dumb pig jumping. Duque hated being forced, so he had an unspeakable evil purpose. Duque raised his hand. All right, for Lady Jaina's beauty. Under Jaina's expectant gaze, Kale, that's and the other curious onlookers, and under the gaze of Duque's guard, Gavin Rad and his maid Vanessa, Duque made his move. The immature ice circuit circulated, but with the help of the system, Duque created the most perfect fantasy effect. A huge ice crystal box appeared around Jaina. To be precise, it was this beautiful, almost transparent ice crystal box that contained Jaina. A box made of ice. Many Dalajan Morning Star mages could do it. What they couldn't do was obviously the incomparably intricate composition of the sound tube, soundboard, gears, springs, dampers and other components inside. Although Kale, that's immediately sensed that the composition of this big box was incomparably complicated. As a magical genius and mechanical idiot, Kale, that's would never have guessed that it was a music box. 2 hands of magic gently twisted the springs on the big box. 2 beautiful ice crystal sculptures on the box began to spin and dance, one male and one female. The simple rotation was accompanied by a dazzling stream of light. And the foreign music that sounded from the music box easily evoked Jaina's beautiful memories of the past. She even felt a little nostalgic and fell into a dreamy imagination. No one thought that Duque could actually solidify abstract music into tangible magical artwork. It was simply a miracle. The sound made Jaina intoxicated. Well, if this music score could be composed with lyrics, it would be, "Ignore me, I'm a peddler, it's only natural for me to be worn down." Chapter 277. Duque turned his head and threw Jaina to the back of his mind. There were many people and many things that could not be touched at this time. Just like Thizad. When he saw this sinister guy, Duque wanted to cover his head and smash it with a brick. Finally, he could destroy his soul so that he could not even be a lich in the future. Unfortunately, he could not. He was one of the 6 members of the Kirin Tor Parliament. If he killed him, it would be tearing apart the alliance and even starting a war with the Dalajan. Moreover, Thizad was only a second-rate character. If he really wanted to make a move, it would be towards the first-rate. For example, he could get rid of the guy next to him and get a phoenix mount or something. Well, Duque's thoughts had gone astray. In fact, Duque respectfully paid a visit to Antonidas, who was recuperating from his injuries. The old man looked very energetic. He was not even lying on the bed. Duque met Antonidas in his laboratory. If Duque had not repeatedly confirmed that that was leading the way and that Duque, who could be resurrected, was not afraid of being shot in the back, Duque would definitely have suspected that Antonidas was a part-time dark warlock. The hall was very large and very dark. It was not because the lighting was not good, or because Antonidas had some kind of mental illness that made him like to hide in the dark and quietly enjoy the peace. It was because the air in the entire hall was filled with a large amount of dark energy. Even though Antonidas had already summoned a few bishops of the Church of the Holy Light to continuously purify the evil energy with holy light, the evil aura that came out of the hall did not stop. "Master Antonidas, is your curse still not healed?" Old Antonidas used a golden translucent cover to cover the thing and then replied to Duque, "What? Curse? That thing has long been shaved to the limit by Archbishop Fail. I was worried that His Excellency the Archbishop was too powerful and destroyed that thing, so I couldn't study it. That's why the Archbishop left a little." Duque was dumbfounded. He saw that Antonidas had used a mysterious method to separate the curse that was almost branded on his soul and place it in a mirror image of himself for magic research. "Doesn't it hurt when your soul is separated?" Duque asked. Soul separation was definitely 100 or 1,000 times more painful than someone using a saw to slowly cut off your hand. Duque didn't know how Antonidas had done it. The white-haired old mage stroked his beard. "There are some things that you'll get used to after doing it too many times. For the sake of research, this was nothing. Besides, aren't you also using soul separation? I've heard about your demonstration against King Eden. You didn't leave a trace of your soul in the mirror image, so how could you perform such precise operations? Your mirror image avatar was destroyed by that sword saint. You must be in pain, right?" Seeing Duque's expression as he recalled the pain, Antonidas thought that he had guessed correctly. "It hurts a little," Duque answered honestly. A perfect misunderstanding. Duque's mirror image avatar really wasn't controlled with his soul. However, being stabbed by the Fireblade clan's chief Dal with his triple blood blade was truly painful. The system genie didn't detect his existence at all, and the protective shield that the system genie had released for him in a fraction of a second was unable to block it. As for Duque himself, because he hadn't mastered the ice circuit, he didn't have the ice barrier that was commonly known as a refrigerator. After coming to the world of Azeroth, Duque realized that spells or skills that could give you a short period of invincibility and protect you from any damage were not easy to obtain. The invincibility of a holy knight had to be truly recognized by the holy light. Similarly, the mage's ice barrier was the same. Of course, Duque could make ordinary ice. But in the face of absolute attack power, the hardness of ice was just a joke. To achieve that temporary invincibility, it was already close to the realm of domain power. For this, a top-grade ice circuit was indispensable. Otherwise, even if he learned it, it would only be a weakened version of ice barrier that only gave 2 or 3 seconds of invincibility. How could Duque bear this? At critical times, 1 extra second was life. Oh no, that was moral integrity. Ugh. Either he didn't learn it or he learned the best. Did you come here to see if this old man can still fight? Alright, I was wrong. I shouldn't have abandoned my duties to the Alliance and secretly come here to do research. The next time that ghoul, Dan, comes, I promise I'll take action. Of course, it's also fine if it's someone of that level. Antonidas stuffed a magic beacon into Duque's palm. Activate the beacon. I'll be there in a minute. Duque was a little speechless, but after thinking about it, it made sense. As the dignified Dalijan chairman, he definitely wouldn't need him to take action against any random enemy. The fact that he was willing to come at his beck and call was already giving him a lot of face. Besides, a Breaking Dawn mage who could teleport to any place on the continent at any time really had the capital to be willful. Duque didn't have much to say. Antonidas looked at Duque, who refused to leave, and blinked. Is there something? Or do you also want to study this unknown mysterious curse? Why don't you be my assistant? I'm very interested in how you use Hand of Magic. I can give you the treatment of a morning rank assistant. Duque was embarrassed. He scratched his head. Duque still took out the letter that Lady Janice wanted him to send to Antonidas. Actually, Lady Janice asked me to give you a letter. Seeing the fire seal on the letter and the unique magical security method that lingered on the envelope, Antonidas, this old man, blushed slightly. He took the envelope with both hands, opened it impatiently, and then, the old man's face collapsed. It was an expression of laughter and anger. Antonidas seemed to want to get angry, but he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In the end, he gave in. The ice circuit model, right? That little girl really knows how to extort. Alright, it's my fault. This reason barely makes sense. Right, here you go. Antonidas waved his right index finger over his temple. Duque suddenly saw a series of mysterious, ice-blue magic runes appear on his temple. The continuous runes formed a small ribbon that wrapped around Antonidas' index and middle fingers. Antonidas then handed this rune ribbon to Duque. When Duque once again saw that familiar yet strange three-dimensional magic model enter his mind, Duque was so excited that he almost kissed Antonidas. System notification. Congratulations, host. You have obtained the Breaking Dawn Magic Circuit Model, Ice Crown. This is a magic circuit model that Breaking Dawn Archmage Antonidas has continuously modified and optimized for 30 years. After comparing it with Anastrian Sunstrider's Arcane Fire Circuit, the circuit has no flaws. The circuit model is rated as S perfect. It can increase the ability of the ice magic circuit by 108 times or more. It is recommended to practice it immediately. Chapter 278. 108 times? It sounded exaggerated, but in fact, it was because the ice circuit that Duque had created himself was too lousy. The magic model that he had casually found in Corazon's library was definitely something that Duque had no choice but to do. Fortunately, rebuilding the magic circuit was not as troublesome as cultivating meridians like in the Wuxia novels that Duque had read before he transmigrated. Although the magic circuit was an important source of magic power for mages to cast spells, the magic circuit could be modified or even transplanted. The ice circuit was a bit like installing an air conditioner in the body. To put it simply, as long as there was a channel to continuously transport the heat away from the body, the effect of cooling could be achieved. To make it more complicated, all sorts of things were needed, such as filtering the air that was sucked into the air conditioner, mixing it with the fresh air outside, cooling it down, and then transporting it back to the place where it was needed. The same was true for the top-notch ice circuit. Compared to the ordinary ice circuit, the Crown of Ice was undoubtedly much better. First of all, the number of elemental planes that could be connected at the same time could theoretically reach up to 128. And the number of suction points that could absorb ice elements from the atmosphere was 256. The ordinary version had 3 planes and 12 suction points. Secondly, it was stability and anti-interference. The ordinary version had only one connection method, and if it was broken, it was broken. The Crown of Ice had multiple threads that were connected at different frequencies at the same time. If a few were broken, others could be added. Then there was coordination. Antonidas' advanced product had designed a magic circuit array that could mix the ice elements of various elemental planes with different output per unit of time, and finally turn them into a unified flow that would be injected into the next level of the circuit system. Finally, there was filtering. The crown of ice would automatically determine the purity of the ice elements in the circuit based on the physical condition of the owner. The more impure ice elements that were brushed down would gather over to the arcane fire circuit and fuse with the elements brushed down from the arcane fire circuit to form a new spell, Chaotic Frostfire Missile. This kind of magic attack composed of impurities could not attack stronger spellcasters, but it would have unexpected effects against some creatures with extraordinary self-healing abilities. After reading the introduction of the Crown of Ice magic circuit, Duque was indescribably happy. However, it was necessary to be wary of others. This was the Dalajan's territory, so of course, Duque would not practice the Crown of Ice here. Looks like I'll have to find a time to go back to the Corazon. Just as Duque was about to bid farewell to Antonidas, Duque's meddlesome system elf helped him scan the contents of the letter. On it was written, "Dear senior brother, it's time to return the favor you owe me. Give the crown of frost to Duque. I hope that he can help me take care of my precious daughter, Elugia. You can't refuse. Otherwise, I'll expose the fact that you peeped on me while I was bathing 20 years ago." It was signed, "Your most beloved junior sister, Janice." Duque was really blind. He seemed to have discovered some secret about how messy the circle of rich people was. But seeing that Janice still maintained her beauty at this age, it was obvious that Janice must have been a great beauty when she was young. But 20 years ago, Antonidas would have been close to 60 years old. Alright, this guy was really an old pervert. Duque pretended not to see such gossip. Anyway, Duque said goodbye to Antonidas with a straight face. When he came out, he was surprised to find that Kale, was still waiting for him. Your Highness, Duque had wanted to say "you're so free," but he changed his words. "I'm really ashamed that you've waited for me for so long." The High Elf Prince was as dazzling as ever. His white teeth could be used in a toothpaste advertisement, and his golden hair could be used in a shampoo advertisement. Before Duque's transmigration, he would definitely be a national-level handsome. Alright, Duque was being modest, but in reality Duque was jealous. Kill, that's smile was as amiable as ever. "I'm the one who should be ashamed. I've seen a lot of magic messages and magic images. I also think that the existence of the orcs is a nightmare for the entire world of Azeroth. Whether I'm a part of the continent or a part of Kirin Tor, I should participate in the war. Unfortunately, no one can escape from their origins. Since I can't go to the battlefield, I can only help you in this way. Because this is also helping the Alliance." Duque suddenly sighed. "Well, that was indeed a good young man. If not for the series of tragedies and conspiracies surrounding him in his later life, he would definitely be the kind of person who was a good student when he was young, one of the top 10 outstanding youths when he grew up, and an idol like him when he was older." Alright, Duque took back the idea of killing this guy and making him drop a phoenix or something. "For now, thank you for your help, Your Highness. If possible, I hope you can call me Kale, and I also hope to be able to call you Duque." "Alright, Kale, Duque, is there anything else you want to do? Could you help me find Miss Alicia Barev? She seems to still be in class. I can get someone to inform her. However, I know a good place to drink tea and chat while waiting for Miss Barev." Good idea. What Kale said was indeed a good place. Duque didn't know how to describe this place. Generally speaking, this hotel called the Magic Hotel had functions of dining, entertainment, and gatherings. This hotel next to the Dalajan Central Square was more like an elegant salon. Sitting in a private room on the second floor of the hotel, looking at the same purple brick pattern under his feet, and then looking at the purple houses in the distance, it really had a different flavor. This was the Dalajan city before it was destroyed. This Dalajan city could be said to be of the same architectural style as the Sky City that floated in the sky in the future. Most of them were purple torch-like pillars or towers, fire-shaped or circular roofs, with torch-like golden edges and long white pillars below. It looked a bit like the Middle Eastern architectural style before Duque transmigrated. Sipping the faint red wine, he looked at the mages and magic apprentices coming and going below. Duque listened attentively. Almost everyone was talking about magic or magic-related things. There was almost no topic about the orcs. It was completely impossible to see that the dark clouds of war had enveloped the entire northern continent. "Very peaceful, isn't it?" Kelvitz asked. "Yes. I don't feel the aura of war. In fact, it still has an impact. Because of the advent of war in July, the entire kingdom has changed 70% of the fields that were originally used to grow magic materials to grow food. At the same time, the parliament has announced that any high-consumption or high-risk experiments are prohibited. All battle mages have cancelled their holidays and changed to be on standby 24 hours. War is really too terrifying. If this kind of war continues for a few years, I really can't imagine what will happen to the Dalian. Chapter 279. Hey Duque, how long do you think this war is going to last? Kelvitz asked. Duke smiled faintly. Are you asking another friend in a casual conversation as a friend? Or are you asking the deputy commander of the alliance as an official? Kale, that smiled faintly. Friends. That's simple. It depends on how many more neutral forces the reckless beastmen will provoke. The more they provoke, the faster the beastmen will be destroyed. Oh. Don't be fooled by the fact that the alliance has united 8 kingdoms to fight against the horde. In fact, there are still many neutral forces that haven't participated in the war, Duque said. For example, the goblins in the southernmost Stranglethorn Vale, the wild hammer dwarves in the hinterlands, or the northernmost Kuel Salis. At this point, Kale, that couldn't help but sigh. He then raised his head. What if we maintain the status quo? That depends on how long the Iron Stove Castle's bronze-bearded dwarves can last. If they are destroyed before the Alliance's counterattack, then it's very likely that this will become a long-lasting confrontation between the 2 continents of the Eastern Kingdom. It's not impossible for a war to break out for 100 years. Kale, that's expression turned ugly. What if all these forces join the war against the Horde? Duque raised a finger. Within a year the Horde will definitely be defeated. This is the best news I've heard recently. A melodious voice came from the door of the private room. 2 beautiful women appeared at the door. The one who spoke was naturally Jaina, who had a good impression of Duque. Jaina, who had just received praise from Duque and the envy of countless female Dalian mage apprentices, had no idea that this was Duque's bad idea. Jaina's impression of Duque was not low. Of course, it was much lower than that of a certain prince of Lordaeron. Jaina, who had changed into a blue magic robe, bowed to Duque like a lady. Lord Marcus, we meet again. Jaina was in a good mood. Her face was full of sunshine, as though the haze of war had been dispelled by her smile. The other was the person Duque was waiting for, the eldest daughter of the Barov family, Lucia Barov, who was only 15 years old. It was obvious that Lucia had inherited her mother's beauty. No, she was even more beautiful than Duchess Janice. Interestingly, Lucia's appearance was more in line with the Eastern aesthetic. Her skin was white and exquisite, sparkling and translucent like carved ivory jade. Her beautiful black hair was parted in the middle, obediently falling from her ears to her chest. On her forehead, there was a beautiful silver hair ornament, inlaid with a sparkling sapphire. She did not have any makeup applied on her delicate and pretty little face. Under her long and thin eyebrows, a pair of fan-like eyelashes were embedded with a pair of ice-blue eyes that were as enchanting as the autumn waters. Her eyebrows were curved like willow leaves and her nose was straight and beautiful. The wings of her nose seemed to be flaring slightly. Below her elegant nose was a small cherry mouth. Although she did not wear lipstick, she looked brighter and more attractive than those who did. Her well-defined lips were rosy, like ripe cherries ready to be picked at any time. Even though she was wearing a loose mage robe, it was not difficult to see that she had the golden ratio of a figure. Her waist was slender but not too round. She was as perfect as a model. She was quite a beauty. In fact, in terms of appearance, Lucia was definitely not inferior to the beauties Duque had seen, such as Princess Kalia or Aurelia. She was even slightly better than Jaina, who had yet to fully develop her body. If there was anything that Lucia did not compare to them, it would be temperament. The impression that Princess Kalia gave Duque was that she was noble and kind. Aurelia was a mixture of the wildness of a ranger and the elegance of a high elf. Jaina was intelligent and extremely confident. As for Lucia, although the Barov family was also a high-ranking noble family, it could be seen that Lucia had also received an extremely good upbringing. However, Lucia looked more docile. As soon as she saw Duque, she almost hurriedly looked Duque up and down. Alicia gave up on looking at Duque. She lowered her eyelids and slightly lowered her head, which was also a very standard ladylike etiquette. Greetings, Duke Marcus. I am Alicia Barov. Her timid voice made people want to bully her or to protect her. Duque secretly sighed in his heart. With such a temperament, Alicia was destined to be a good marriage partner and a good wife for a man. However, Alicia would definitely not be a heroine like Aurelia. Alicia, I believe your mother has already sent someone to inform you of the details? Duque asked. Yes. In fact, it was my mother who personally used a magic message to tell me. Duque pondered for a moment in his heart. That makes things easier. Right now, I am essentially just a sky wizard. It doesn't seem right for me to teach a peak earth wizard like you. You can be my assistant for now. After I pass this winter and advance to a morning star wizard, we can confirm our relationship. All right. Duque still did not know that his words had already set off a storm in Kale, that's in Jaina's hearts. How could a morning star wizard be promoted so easily? At the level of a morning star wizard, one could already be addressed as a master. Further up, at the level of Radiant Moon, they were existences as rare as phoenix feathers and Chelan horns. Usually wizards of this level were big shots. For example, people like Kale, that's Krasis and Kel, Thuzad could easily become dukes or princes, regardless of their origins. There were only 2 breaking dawns in the entire world. When Duque said he wanted to advance, he did it as easily as if he was eating and drinking. If it were anyone else, they would definitely be treated as a braggart. However, he was Duque, a man who had tricked more than 200,000 orcs twice and burned half of the elven forest. When the Kirin Tor assembly had summoned Duque for a discussion, Kale, that's had a very deep impression of Duque. Duque did everything with complete confidence, as if nothing in the world could escape his predictions. It was as if a man like him rarely boasted, and there was no need for him to use such deceptive methods to lie about such matters. If Duque dared to say something like this, it would only mean that Duque was 100% confident. One had to know that Duque would only be 16 next year. A 16-year-old morning star wizard. If not for Duque's status as the Alliance's deputy commander and his glorious achievements, this alone would have made Duque the most dazzling star in the world of wizards. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.